Hello, everyone. Hope you all have had a terrific end to your week. Well, for those that stop working on a Friday, anyways. Welcome to yet another White Pill show. This one's a little special. Got something different planned this time around. But before we get into that, if you want to support the show, shoot me a follow, like, subscribe, whichever platform you're watching this on. Um, that's really the best thing that you could do to support, just to help get the message out. And more importantly, recently I just opened up donations. So if you'd like to support me financially, by no means do not feel obligated to. Watching this show is enough support. But if you did want to donate, the link can be found on my bio link. So it's bio.link/whitepill. Should be in the description for this episode in the stream. If you can't find it, you can just find it on my X page there. It's in the description. If you go to PayPal, you can donate, add some text. I only read donations at the end of stream. I typically do not read chat for the most part. So that'll be the only way if you want to ask some questions, get your voice heard, whatnot, give me your take on what I'm saying. That would be the best way to do it. We're working on getting crypto set up if people want to donate in crypto instead. And I'll let you guys know as soon as that is up. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Let me just pull up my notes here real quick. Give me 1 second. Beautiful. Okay. So today's show is going to be a little different. Usually the focus is on finding news stories that are white pilled or white pilling, that typically have an optimistic point of view on what's happening in the world, or at least a negative story, but finding the positive twist in it. But today we're going to be pivoting to a new direction in the White Pill project. And I'm going to start. How do I put this? With the state of the things the way they are in Canada, it's almost impossible to ignore the steep decline that we've taken in a single generation. And it's affecting my life, it's affecting the lives of the people around me. And I see this decline not just here in Canada, but all over the world, in many places in the United States, in certain European countries. And I want to do something about it. So my contribution to helping it is, for part one, to talk about these issues, but this isn't just to sit here and bitch and moan about the things that are happening politically or economically or what have you. If you want that kind of analysis, there are plenty of content creators that will get you there. Plenty of ones that are better matched than I to talk about some of these issues. But my goal here in talking about them is not just to create some kind of signal or noise. I want to also work on solutions on these problems, and I want to open source that and open it to the public so that people can see it and participate in it. And so by talking through these things, I am going to be looking to identify certain pain points or certain things that could be utilized in order to actually add a permanent fix, because the state of things the way they are, it is not sustainable. If we keep going down this path with our nation's culture, with our economic policies, our immigration policies, there's not going to be a Canada as it is now in the future. And I really don't want that, because I, frankly, for all the things that I dislike about the current climate, this is the country that gave me everything. My family came here with little to nothing but a couple bucks in our pocket, and I've been given opportunities that had I lived elsewhere, I would not have had access to. And I'm by default eternally grateful for that. For all the negative things that I'll be mentioning tonight about the state of life in Canada. I want to at least say that underneath it all, I loved growing up in this country. It was amazing. I mean, of all the places to grow up, this has got to be one of the best places to do it. Um, and I'll get into that as well and why that is in my experience. But I want that opportunity to be available for the generations of the future, like any decent person would. And that doesn't make me some kind of a saint, of course. No, furthest thing from it. It's just I don't think we should downgrade in expectations just because this is the way things are. I think it's possible in the 21st century, even with all our faults as a species, to replicate that kind of thing and make it better. I mean, isn't that the goal for every single generation, is to take all the great things that they experienced and improve on them? And yet it seems to be the opposite now. It seems to me that the younger generations just keep getting fucked left and right, and it just keeps getting worse. And I don't want that to be the state of things. I want it to turn around. I want it to be the opposite. And so, in my little corner of the internet, I want to at least offer an alternative, a different vision for what Canada can be, instead of sitting around and hoping to have change come through what, like, elections, voting for representatives, as it is right now, taking a side whether you're liberal or conservative, and because nobody votes for the NDP realistically. Come on, let's get real. And the Quebec, I mean, unless you live in Quebec, um, that way of life is over. It doesn't work anymore. These people don't give a shit. They haven't given a shit for the longest time, but now it's to the point where they're just brazen about it. I mean, it is beyond ridiculous. I hear about millions just being wasted on futile programs while we have veterans starving in the streets. We have first generation immigrants coming here to look for a better opportunity, and they're just getting fucked because there's no work, there's nothing. They're living in squalor, basements piled up in mattresses of like upwards of 10 people, I've heard before. But before we get into that all I'm trying to say is we're pivoting in a more Canada centric direction with the shows moving forward. I'm still going to be talking about international issues every now and then, but for the most part, this is going to be the focus of the Whitepill project moving forward. We'll see if it changes, but right now, I want to do my part to preserve the absolutely amazing quality of life that I experienced growing up here. And I want that to be available to the next generations. And I think starting by talking about it and by offering some solutions and actually building things, projects and initiatives, what have you, I think that's the way forward. So let's get into it. Just as a background, I rarely talk about my experience growing up in Canada because typically these shows focus on an interview subject. But I'll just start off by giving a little intro. So my family, we immigrated here in the early 2000s from a country that used to be a colony of the Soviet Union. And like I said, we came here with little to nothing in our pocket, had to sell just about everything, um, barely knew a lick of English. I think, yeah, I think I probably had the worst literacy out of my entire family when it comes to that. Um, and we came here. I even remember like one of the first nights that we found an apartment to stay in. Uh, we had to sleep on newspaper because we didn't have any furniture. It was just funny looking back. It was just the one night, but um, we came here looking for opportunity because all the teachers and the professionals and doctors, engineers were fleeing the Soviet Union. Well, then the ex-Soviet Union, because there was nothing left. There was no opportunity. It was all in a decline. So it was a race to get out. Those that were smart did it early, uh, and we were lucky to get out just in time before shit got real bad, and immediately got to work. My parents took up jobs even though Canadian experience wasn't recognized. Um, for those that aren't aware, when you immigrate to Canada, I think the US as well to an extent, though I don't know how their system works. Even if you're an engineer in your country back home, they will not recognize that experience. Even if you were like a nuclear scientist. I mean, I guess they maybe make an exception in that case, but they wouldn't recognize your experience. So it didn't matter the years of schooling that you had spent being a pro in your field. Now you're just a taxi driver. Now you're just a cleaning lady, right? But they took up jobs. My my family and I, yeah, we I went to school, learned English. We lived in a very immigrant centric area. We had people from all over there. People from the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, uh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, uh, people from Russia, from Ukraine, from all over. It was a mixed community, and we all relatively got along. We were all kids, mostly from first generation immigrants, um, just hanging out in the yard, playing outside. This is before social media and all that, so kind of got the peak childhood there. It was awesome. It was amazing. I remember going to the corner store down the street. Um, those sour keys, those little candies, they'd cost like 25 cents. So if you had a quarter in your pocket, you had one. And buying slushies, or when the ice cream truck came by, going to summer camp, um, doing after school programs, joining clubs. It was just a nice, wholesome experience. It was great. It was the best of what we could make it. And because we were beside, other people that were first generation as well, there was kind of a shared experience in that. And it was just overall like a very positive time. I can't say that I had a terrible childhood growing up here in Canada. It was great. We were very lucky. We weren't like extremely well off, but we made do with what we had. We lived the immigrant experience. That's what it was. And we adapted. We learned the language, we learned the holidays, the customs, all the different songs, national anthem every single day at school. We adapted to the culture because this is where we are now, not in the Soviet Union. And you can barely tell by my accent, but yeah, that's where we came from. And so I can't really say that I had any negative experiences, anything overtly negative. Nothing like what I notice now on the streets. I couldn't imagine what it's like now for immigrant families coming over with rent being sky high. The cost of living is insane. Groceries for a family of 3, 4, 5 people. I mean, I couldn't imagine that, like, doing that now. That would be extremely hard. Much harder than it was then. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't an easy ride. My parents put in the work, and so did I. And so it was a great time. I realize I'm talking in loops here, but I'm going through all the memories. Um, and so eventually, went off to university, got the experience with the quote unquote real world, and that's when I started to notice the decline, because now, right as I'd come in to university, we had Justin Trudeau come into power, and he stayed prime minister for about 10 years or so. And back then, growing up, I didn't really pay attention to politics much. Didn't really know what it was all about. America was usually the focus for us. As much as Canadians love to shit on America, they're basically our focus for half the day. Um, but I hadn't encountered politics right up until that point. And so then when I started to see some of these different policies play out and how people voice their opinions about them on campus and how people interacted with one another. This was around the time when Obama was president in his second term, um, with the start of I guess, not the Cultural Revolution, but I mean, you had BLM starting up, all this stuff against, what was it, anti patriarchy, right? All these social movements. It was kind of just starting out when I was going to university. And as I looked around, I realized that this was no longer the country that I was familiar with, one that I had grown up with, the same one. It felt starkly different. Not only because I'd moved cities and I got to experience a different environment, but just because I started to pay attention to some of the opinions that people had and the sensitivities that they had towards certain subjects. And I started to realize that Canada was no longer a place where the kind of upbringing that I had, that my classmates had, that my peers had, it was no longer possible. Or at least the possibility of having that kind of upbringing, it was just becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. That if fewer and fewer people were able to have that, and it's a shame because as I said, it was pretty damn good. Going to public school, going to the community center, playing in the library, all that. It just that whole time, it seemed further and further away. And don't take my word for it, right? I'm not trying to sit here and be like, oh man, those are the good old days. I realize that nostalgia is absolutely the mind killer, and sitting in that position for too long will do you no good. But don't take my word for it. All right, this is a report that the RCMP put out. I think about a year ago or so. This is a redacted report that was leaked, so this is not available to the public technically until some news sources got a hold of it. It was just towards the tail end of COVID, and basically this report, right? And I'll add a link to all these sources in the description of the video. But this report essentially states that if Canadians were aware of just how bad their lives are, just how bad their living conditions are, they will revolt. They will absolutely revolt. Right? And there was a National Post piece that was covering this report when it came out. It states, secret RCMP report warns Canadians may revolt once they realize how broke they are. Right from the get-go, the report authors warn that whatever Canada's current situation, it will probably deteriorate further in the next 5 years. Right, let me just read this article for a bit. A secret RCMP report is warning the federal government that Canada may descend into civil unrest once citizens realize the hopelessness of their economic situation. Quote, the coming period of recession will accelerate the decline in living standards that the younger generations have already witnessed compared to earlier generations, reads the report, entitled Whole of Government 5-Year Trends for Canada. Another quote, for example, many Canadians under 35 are unlikely ever to be able to buy a place to live, it adds. The report, labeled secret, is intended as a piece of special operational information to be distributed only within the RCMP and among decision makers in the federal government. A heavily redacted version was made public as a result of an access to information request filed by Matt Malone, an assistant professor of law at British Columbia's Thompson Rivers University, and an expert in government secrecy. Describing itself as an introduction as a scanning exercise, the report is intended to highlight trends in both Canada and abroad that could have a significant effect on the Canadian government and the RCMP. Right, and the article goes on. And like I said, I'll make this report available for anyone that is interested in reading it. But it essentially goes into detail explaining exactly why these conditions are concerning for the government. Why they should be concerned that once the people learn of just how bad their life is, that they will revolt. The fact that this was written at all, and this was just a side note in the news, is nothing short of fucking incredible. I mean, here you have a government, like an official, the RCMP, for anyone that's curious, right? This is essentially the FBI in America. That is the equivalent, right? Their job is to investigate federal crimes or extremely serious crimes that get national attention in Canada. That is their whole purpose. They are the investigative arm of the federal government. Right? These guys are not to be fucked with. And so they come out with a report saying that if Canadians knew just how bad they had it, they would revolt. And I'm not talking like the trucker convoy where they just pull up a bunch of trucks. No. Revolt means a completely different thing. Revolt means that people will start dismissing institutions. Revolt means that people will be out in the streets. They will be finding where politicians live and harassing them. They will be taking matters into their own hands. That's what revolt is. Revolt isn't going out in the streets and holding a placard and protesting. Revolt is an open dismissal of the government as it exists and a forcible dissolution of it by the people. That's what revolt means. It's half of the word revolution. Almost. Missing a couple letters. Right? And for those that don't know, right, because Canada has this reputation of being this beautiful country that's open to immigrants. Everything is nice and hunky-dory, no corruption, everyone's nice, we leave the front door open. No. That may have been the case at some point. Right? At some point along the way when I was growing up, that was the case. And now it's not. It absolutely is not. And some of these things that I'm going to talk about tonight have been simmering under the surface of the Canadian psyche for the longest time, but there's never been a concerted effort for a movement or for a social awakening of sorts, for people to understand all of this in the context of it all and start to make certain changes in their lives so that they could work to rid themselves of this way of life. Because, like I said before at the beginning of this podcast, this way of life that we are on right now, this path that we are on, it is not sustainable. Point blank, it is not sustainable. And so today's episode, the whole point of it is to kind of uncover that. So there's going to be a lot of black pills, don't get me wrong. Going to be very few white pills this episode, unfortunately, but this is the truth, and we got to speak it. So, on that note, going to be going through a couple different categories of stories that will explain just how bad life is in Canada and why or how it has deteriorated in this way. The first thing is something that people might be familiar with. It's called the carbon tax, right? And let me just pull up a quick explainer with Perplexity. The carbon tax is essentially, this was a tax that was created by Justin Trudeau in 2019. Not created then, but it was implemented in 2019 for the purpose of taxing fossil fuel use by both civilians and companies in order to take that money and invest it back into initiatives that would quote unquote save the environment, or at least like help us reduce our carbon emissions, right? That was the goal. That was the aim. That's what we were presented with. And that's a nice notion, right? How would you like to pay an extra 5%, but Canada does its part to actually save the planet, right? If you buy into that premise. Sounds nice. Sounds nice on the face of it. It sure does sound nice. It certainly sounds something that Canadians would do, that Canadians would go for. But in reality, what happens is, especially during COVID with the issues of the supply chain, this tax was forced upon us nationally, right? If your province did not have a carbon tax already implemented, this would essentially take that over. So without having a voice to represent the people against this tax, the Conservative Party tried, but they clearly didn't succeed in their mission because it was passed regardless. This tax was passed, and so essentially any product, any service, anything that was consumed by people that involved the burning of fossil fuels now had an extra surcharge on top of that. And you might think, okay, well, so what? I don't care. I drive a car. I take the bus. Or sorry, I don't drive a car. I take the bus. I take public transport. Okay, good for you. You happen to live in a metropolitan city. And you can afford yourself that luxury. But that's actually not the case, because if they put a tax on essentially every single time that a fossil fuel is burned, that you get taxed on that, that means that anything that is manufactured with the use of fossil fuels, which is literally fucking everything that we consume requires fossil fuels, everything. Because even if it's not used in the manufacturing of that product, it's used in the transport of that product. And that company isn't just going to take that charge lying down. They're not just going to pocket that and be like, "Oh no, it's okay. We'll do our part." Of course they're not going to fucking do that. They're a business. Their whole idea is to make money. So they're going to pass it down to the consumer. So this carbon tax, right? Even if you didn't have gas heating in your home, even if you didn't drive a car, you were still affected by it. And this was done on a national scale. Okay, everybody was forced to participate. And so to offset some of this, they said, okay, well, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a carbon rebate so that at the end of the tax year, everyone, based on the amount of carbon taxes they paid, they get a small rebate. But that the amount they gave back is obviously not going to be the same as what we put in. Because then, first of all, what the fuck would be the point? Why would you just take people's money only to return the entire piece to them? That makes no fucking sense. Why would you do that? Right? Because a portion of this, about 10% of this, went to those green initiatives that I was speaking about earlier. So people were getting taxed, and then the rebate that they would receive would be lower than they actually paid. So you're still getting taxed. Right? They praised this rebate in Parliament. It's like, oh, this is going to be, people are going to be getting more money than they actually put in. So somebody's getting fucked. At some point, somebody is getting fucked, and somebody has to pay for this. Because nothing is free in this life. Right? And so every single product that people consumed, all your food, all your tech, everything, anything that had a payment or had a point where it had to get shipped somewhere was getting taxed. Right? And so as a result, you had an increase in food prices. And here's an article from the CBC in this past November. Food prices in Canada keep climbing, but these grocery items will give you sticker shock. Coffee rose up 41%. And this is from Statistics Canada, mind you. This isn't some bullshit website. Fresh or frozen ground beef rose 17.4%. Nuts and seeds rose by 15%. Fruit juices 10%. Confectionery 10%. So people were just paying more for groceries while we're living in a cost of living crisis. While we're living through that. While it's already hard enough to live, these people, the government decided that it was a great idea to tax their people. Great. Now, here's somebody's gas bill, right? And this was posted on Twitter, so I don't know if it was actually faked, but this seemed like a genuine enough bill, and a lot of people were sharing theirs. So this is an example of it. So here in the top, you'll see an energy charge for natural gas for the month, $1,848. And if you go to the bottom here, to third-party charges, the federal carbon tax ended up being $2,390. So that's almost 150% of what they actually already paid for the bill. Right? And so this gas bill is essentially almost twice as much as the original payment. Actually, it's more. Now that I think about it. Sorry, my math is a little off. A bit of a long day today. So the bill ends up being so much more than it was originally. And for what? For what? So that the government can collect an additional tax? Here's another example of a gas bill. Oh, whoops. Those are my notes. $49, right, of gas use. Federal carbon tax, $44. Cool. So almost twice the bill. You're paying twice the bill. For what? For fucking what? So politicians could get up in front of Parliament and talk about how we're investing in green energy? I'm getting fucked because of that? Because you want to get votes? Okay, all right, interesting. Interesting take on it. And once again, right, the concern here, the main concern is that, like, what is this actually for? Because when you look at this chart, in terms of Canada's contributions to CO2 emissions globally, if we look at this little sliver here, North America excluding USA, do you see how fucking small that is? Compared to literally every other region, South America, Africa, India, China being the biggest one. They contribute, I think, just over a quarter to all global emissions. They don't give a fuck. They're firing up coal plants left, right, and center. They do not give a shit about the Tokyo Accords. Look at Asia, Oceania, Europe, the US, and North America, excluding the USA. That includes Mexico. So we're a sliver of that. So according to these figures, Canada contributes about 1.5% to global emissions. Why the fuck do we have a carbon tax? What sense does that make? We pay money we pay more money on everything, every product, food, water, electricity, like fucking everything. Anything that's transported. Anything that is generated with fossil fuels, which once again is everything. For what? For what? How is there any justification for this? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. And this is still in effect, right? So when Mark Carney became our prime minister, right, when he just popped out of nowhere, hasn't even lived in Canada for the last several years. When he came up as our prime minister, he knew this was one of the chief issues that the Conservative Party had been pressing the Liberals on. And they need to get it out of the eye for the voters for the new election. They got to make some kind of compromise. We can't just keep fucking these people and getting away with it. There's got to we got to give them something. So what they did was they implemented a commercial carbon tax. So like a carbon tax specifically for businesses. But even if they just removed the carbon tax from like personal use, so no more carbon tax on gas or any like personal products like that, and they just kept it for the businesses, our groceries are still gonna be getting taxed. So is every other product that we use and we buy. Everything still has an artificial tax. Okay, so now what? Drivers don't complain as much? You're still fucking the people. You're just hiding behind this facade. I mean, there's a famous moment. Let me see if I can find it. Where Mark Carney is talking about the carbon tax on a show. And he's saying, well, we're moving it. We're calling it the industrial carbon tax. Right? Not a big deal. We're calling it the industrial carbon tax. And I mean, how often do you buy steel girders? You know, how often does that even happen for you? But that's not the point. We're buying the products that those steel girders are used for. We're still buying the fucking thing. You just changed it. You just did some woo magic, added a word in front of it. And what did you achieve? It's still the same tax. And he tried to actually get away with this. Unbelievable. Let me see if I can find the portion of the interview. I don't know if anybody has the timestamp for it. Oh, I guess not. Oh, this is the announcement. So this wasn't the interview. Because there was a moment where he actually... Oh, I think... Let me see if I can find it. I think it's this portion here. Let's just give this a quick listen.
Do is make sure not that the government pays, not that we as taxpayers pay, but the large polluters pay.
Does that not ultimately trickle down?
You know, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd?
Yeah, how much steel are you using? Like, really? That's his fucking line? That's what he used? And he's smiling as he says it? The fucking audacity. Unbelievable. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, okay? Like I said, this stream, I'm going to reveal many which ways Canadians are getting just absolutely royally fucked by their government. And we're letting it happen. We let this happen to us. We fell asleep at the wheel, and we let this happen to us. So in addition to this carbon tax regarding the Canadian economy, we also live in a system of monopolies. So unlike America, where you have open competition for many businesses, even though they do technically, they have a monopolistic economy as well to an extent, they're not the bastion of capitalism, right? There's a handful of companies that own everything. Here in Canada, it's very similar, but it's also helped by the government in a lot of ways, because we have a socialist government, unfortunately. And so these monopolies, for example, here is what the grocery monopoly looks like. So there's 3 brands at the top, Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro, who own, I believe it's like just above 60% of all food supply stores in like across Canada. They own all of these brands. Every single one of them are below them. And this is just groceries. Okay. In terms of telecom, like telecommunications, phones, internet, all that, TV, there's 3. Bell, Rogers, and Telus. Those are the 3. They take up, I think, 90% of the market or so. The rest of them are like the sliver of like 10%. I believe Quebec has a company, and there's a handful of others, but everyone else rents from them. So if you have like, let's say, Freedom Mobile, I believe you're on Bell, because they essentially, even though they are their own company, they use the infrastructure that Bell, Rogers, or Telus have created. So all the little companies that you see, all these phone companies that are popping up on the scene, they all use that infrastructure. It's not new infrastructure. They use all the lines and everything from these companies. So they effectively still own 90% of the market. That's why phone prices, data prices, and internet prices are just absolutely fucked in Canada. I'm paying, like, if I didn't have the deal that I had on my internet, I'd be paying close to $200 for speeds that anybody in a developed country like Canada should have for 20 or 30. If you go to Europe, you can buy SIM cards that give you 5G access for cheap, unlimited plans too, right? Much cheaper than Canada. And even like not even Europe. If you just go to like South Korea, they're among one of the leaders in high speed internet. I'm pretty sure almost everyone in like at least the major cities has gigabit connection, which is insane compared to what we have here. We have all the infrastructure. It's there. It's just because those are the only 3 companies, they get to charge whatever the fuck they want for the services. And it doesn't matter who you switch to. They all have the same prices. Maybe they're off by $10. Maybe you buy some deal during Black Friday. You have $20, $30 off, but it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. That's just telecom, right? 3 grocery conglomerates, as you can see here. There's 2 airlines, two for the entire country, 2. There have been attempts to make a third, and I think even a fourth at one point, but they all got swallowed up by the big players. They essentially got bought out by them because it's almost fucking impossible to operate in that market. There's 5 banks, 2 beer companies, which own at least 50, if not 60% of the market. Everything else are just slivers of independent sellers. The alcohol stores in just about every province, I think in every province, they're owned by the government. So it's not like I can just go into business for myself and open up my own alcohol store. Sorry, beer store, liquor store, whatever the fuck, right? You have to operate by the government. You have to operate with them. You can't operate independently. Like, I can't just open up a store like that. Even though, like, tobacco stores can be opened up, but no, liquor and beer and all that, it goes through the province. Which also keeps the prices high. Like, the prices of liquor compared to the US up here in Canada, it oh my, it is insane. Right? Like, let me look at this. So, for instance, the LCBO, right? We'll compare this, right? Let's find a liquor store in the nearest US city. So what is that? Buffalo, right? Let's find a liquor store. Shouldn't be too hard in Buffalo. Roots Wine and Spirits. Right, let's see if they have an online page. Yes, I am legal. Gotta have Jack Daniels. Just as a staple, right? Really? No fucking Jack Daniels? Okay, unbelievable. Come on, you're failing me here. What's going on? Fatty Beer Co. Is this a bar? No. I just need a liquor store. How is there not? Hodge Liquor. There we go. This is all just famous shit. No. I just need to compare the price of a bottle of Jack. This is all I need. Duty Free Americas? No. No website. Niagara Liquors. Oh, Jesus Christ. Really? No website? Bailey Discount Liquor and Wine. Yes, I'm a human. Come on. Yes, I'm 21 years old. Okay, Jack Daniels. Right, let's look up just a handle of Jack Daniels. Okay, beautiful. 750 mil, $32.99. $45. And I don't even know if they'll have Jack Daniels on the store anymore because now, because of the stupid fucking trade war, we've completely gotten rid of American liquor. Oh, so the price is actually less. Well, that's embarrassing. I thought it'd be smaller. I thought it'd be less. Hold on. No. Bottle of Jack can't cost that much. Really? Hold on. Let's go to Cleveland. Maybe that's just because it's Buffalo. Come on. There we go. Tony's Market. Oh, Tony. Okay. In any case, all right. So apparently it's comparable to at least the one store that I looked. But in any case, because people can't open up their own liquor store, right? You have to go through the government. You have to operate through them. As a result of that, there's no competition in prices. People can't just like buy handles of whatever, vodka, Jack Daniels, what have you. And they can't just choose to price at a different, like the price is set by the province, by the government. We have no choice over that. Absolutely none. You can't even go into business for yourself, which is insane. Right? And even that store that I looked, maybe they just charge more because they can get away with it. They're closer to an urban area. Right? But that's a choice that they have. Here in Canada, we don't have that choice. We can't even do that. It's not legal. Right? And because there's no room for competition, everything just, like the prices, they get fixed. They don't really move much. Why would you? The only reason you'd underprice yourself is because if you're just trying to compete, but realistically, who are you competing with? There's only one other guy in the room. What's the point of that? Right? Why bother? Why bother? Un momento, por favor. Apologies, just something with the stream there. Okay. Because of that, we don't have competition in our businesses for the most part. If you're part of one of these monopolies, there is no competition. Right? And that means a stagnating economy. That not only like affects the prices, but the quality of service. Because now your quality of service just has to match the other guy. You don't have to be better in any significant way or even marginally. There's no incentive. There's no competition. So you can just do whatever the fuck you want, including, right, the recent scandal that just like was finalized in a court of law in Canada, the bread fixing scandal. So apparently, some of the biggest stores, these big monopolies, they agreed to years ago to fix prices for bread. And bread is a fairly common commodity. Everybody buys bread, just about, unless you make your own or you have to eat gluten-free, and even then there's still bread, right? And so they just finished with the class action lawsuit, and today was the last day. It's technically the next day now. Today was the last day that people could sign up to get a $25 rebate off of that. And that is, I guarantee you, that is the bare minimum these fucking companies owe Canadians. Okay, all those years of buying bread and we were overcharged because they got together in some meetings and said, "Fuck it, we're gonna charge the same way, except we're gonna just keep upping the prices every little bit so people won't get curious." And because we're the only game in town, who's gonna go elsewhere for their bread? And it's a fairly common commodity. Just about everybody has a loaf in their basket when they go grocery shopping. Win-win, right? Well, they got caught. They got caught, and they only now, years later, years later, a decade and some time later, they finally caught them, which is good. But I mean, how many of these things are just happening out in the open? How much of this is just a part of our life and we don't notice it? This is the one that we know of for now, right? And even if there is no tacit agreement, even if these people don't actually meet up and agree to fix the prices, they can just look at what the competitor offers. Be like, all right, we'll match that. Which is why it's basically irrelevant unless like you're looking for coverage when you're picking your cell phone provider. Depending on where you live, maybe one of them has better coverage than the other, but realistically, it's the same. So you're getting fucked either way. Right? Now, this is just the monopoly side of Canada. There's much more to go into, and this is just a brief overview. So don't get me wrong. There's going to be a lot more information on this to come. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this, but Canada is essentially a good chunk of our economy is built on monopolies, is built on companies that don't have any incentive to change or improve their services. They're free to just get stuck in their own ways because they just want to make the most money and because the government allows it. They don't do anything. What they should be doing is going in and breaking up these monopolies by force. If it means seizing property from these people, yes, absolutely. Yes. I'm not talking like a full-scale revolution. We go to Mr. Loblaw's house. But if the government has to force these companies to decouple and to distribute assets accordingly, yeah, absolutely, they should be looking into that kind of action. They're not going to do it willingly. These companies aren't just going to step aside and be like, oh, okay, no, you know what? Fair is fair. Fair is fair. We need to look out for the consumers. We need to look out for their best interests. They're not going to do that. They don't give a shit. They want to win. They want the most money. They want their shareholders to earn the most money. They have a fiduciary responsibility to them to do that, to all their investors. So long as they're able to exist in this economy as they do, they're not going to change. And we're just going to keep getting fucked on the prices. There's a few of them here within each brand, a few of these like stores that you can go to that do have lower prices. But how much of that is just recycled product from the other stores? How much of that is already pre-planned? They have budget brands. Of course they do. It's only smart. Capture more of the market. Right? And so this is just one side of it, as I mentioned. The other side of it is this idea of what's called supply management. So this is where the Canadian government steps in to the lives of farmers and forces them to abide by certain economic conditions, certain quotas that they have to fill, so that the price of the product that they produce, say that 10 times fast, so that the price of the product they produce stays at a certain level. This quota is mandated federally. And if farmers exceed that quota and they find to be providing more supply into the market, so they produce extra eggs, extra milk, what have you, and they start selling that in the market, they will be fined. So if you happen to have a good harvest, if you happen to have a good herd, or whatever I guess a milk harvest is called, I'm totally ignorant to it, city boy, I have no fucking clue what it's called, so apologies to the farmers. But if you just happen to have a good year, you got to throw that out. And I understand you might be thinking, Whitepill, there's no fucking way. There's no way they're just dumping food on the ground. Yeah, they fucking are. During COVID, we got to see an example of this where a farmer was forced to dump his milk. This is a video of him doing that and explaining the process. So let's give this a quick listen here. Okay?
Here at Given Rose Farm in southern Ontario, we milk about 260 cows. Right now during the winter months, you milk quite a bit more milk because the feed is very consistent. And if you do a good job, you will produce quite a bit of milk. So, but right now we're over our quota. It's regulated by the government and by the DFO. But the problem is what they don't understand is millions of people look at this milk running away. Because it's the end of the month, so I dump 30,000 liters of milk, it breaks my heart. I will show you, by the way, this here, Canadian milk, it's $7 a liter. When I go for my haircut, people say, wow, $7, Jerry, for a little bit of milk. I say, well, you have to go higher up, because we have no say anymore as a dairy farmer on our own farm, because they they make us dump it. And no matter how we stand up, so this time I'm going public. I want the people to see the pain that us growers have of 365 days. As a little boy, we grew up on a dairy farm, came from Europe, work, and here we are. This is what's happening. Oh, by the way, only one country in the world, here in Canada, there's not the United States, not Europe, where they dump thousands of liters when they're over. But we're not supposed to talk about this because, I don't know, it's just one of those things. But as it's happening, I hope the DFO does look at this and says to themselves, you...
And the video keeps going, but you get the point, right? This is a man, if we were to take him at his word, that came from Europe, or his family did generations ago. Farmers, grew up on the farm. And farm life is more difficult than I could imagine. I wouldn't even know where to start to describe what their day looks like. All I know is the stereotypes. They get at the crack of dawn. These people are breaking their backs, right? Physical labor all day, just doing it nonstop, and they are feeding us. These people deserve the utmost respect, okay? And they are forced to dump their product. Like, right now in Canada, we have a food crisis where people are going hungry, not only because of how expensive it is, but because everything else is so expensive that affording food for some people, it's a luxury. So they have to turn to a food bank, right? And food banks were something that, you know, growing up as a kid, if you had extra cans in the pantry that were going bad, you would donate them, right? Your school would usually have some kind of a drive, or you'd see something on the street, right? And you would donate. It was an act of goodwill. It was charity. People did it out of the goodness of their own heart. At the end of the transaction, when you're at a grocery store, you could buy these little packages that had, like, you know, maybe some bread, some noodles, what have, just basic like necessities, and they would donate those to the food bank. You could just buy those, right, as little care packages for people. But now it's come to the point where food bank usage is so high in Canada that it's a necessity for many people across the nation. And here's an example. And this was years ago, by the way. This video is at least, I think, 2 or 3 years old, because it came out during COVID, right? And we had all those issues with the food supply. And here we are dumping this shit. Dumping it. Just straight up dumping it. Putting it into the ground. Because of quotas to keep the price competitive. Are you fucking kidding me? There's people starving on the streets. People starving in their homes. Kids going to bed without food in their stomach for days on end. And we're dumping this? Now look, milk is just one of the examples. This is just the one that we know of, right? That we have video footage of someone getting rid of it. But this quota applies to everything. Every farmed good. If you overproduce, you will get penalized. So obviously the farmers, they're not millionaires. They don't have boards of investors. They don't have stocks. It's the family or the company that owns it. They're not going to take that additional hit, so they have to play by the rules. The government sets the rules and the business has to play by them. Because otherwise they don't have a choice. What are they going to do? They're going to take the extra hit for what? And I don't blame them. They're doing what it takes to survive. Absolutely. As is their right to do that. And so our government, like, this is a known thing. And this has been happening since before we knew about this. This has been happening since, I'm pretty sure, since the 60s. I'm fairly certain this has been happening since the 60s. Yes. The current system of supply management, according to the CBC, traces its origins to the 1960s, a period of overproduction due to technological advances that resulted in low prices for farmers. While the federal government was keen to support farmers' incomes and the votes that came with them, direct financial support became too heavy a burden for the federal treasury to bear. Bruce Muirhead, a historian at the University of Waterloo, who has written extensively about supply management, said the government of the day felt that 50 to 55 million in annual support payments would seriously upset the balance of the budget. This is one of the reasons we moved to a supply management system. Government wanted to make farming sustainable on its own. The United States, in contrast, has largely maintained support for the farming sector through subsidies. So Americans foot the bill for farm supports indirectly, through the taxes they pay, while Canadians pay for those supports directly, through higher prices for supply management products. So it's not just the fact that they have to dump this. As a result of this price fixing, because they want to keep the prices competitive, we do not import a lot of like dairy products from America. I think the majority of the product, like we just don't, because they can't compete at these prices. Why would they? Why would they bother investing in that? Like, good luck getting a milk product carried in Canada. Good fucking luck, right? And whatever other products are affected by the supply management program. Good fucking, like, why would any country send anything here unless they could compete at those prices? So Canadians are getting raked over the fucking coals yet again for what? So that the government can keep the prices at a certain point? There's there's no other way we could do this. We're literally dumping food on the ground. We're wasting it. That's a sin. And I'm not even. Don't get me wrong. I'm not invoking that word as some religious fanatic. I'm not religious in any way. I've given it some thought, but that's for another day. So I don't use that word lightly. I understand the weight that carries. That is an actual sin to waste food like that. And the government is forcing these farmers to commit that sin every single day. And they've been doing that for years, for decades, since the 60s. The amount that we've dumped into the fucking ground. And we have people going hungry in the streets. We have people going to food banks at record high rates. I mean, like, what? We can't even bottle it and send it elsewhere that needs it? It has to be dumped into the ground? There's nothing that we can do with it? It's crazy. Farmers are getting penalized for overproducing, for being too good at their job. It is nothing short of insane. And here's some more news articles about it. All right, here's yet another article. Some Canadian dairy farmers started dumping milk last week to rid the system of surplus production as demand from restaurants plummeted amid the COVID-19 pandemic that forced eateries across the country to close their doors. Quote, "We first started seeing milk being discarded last week," said David Weens, vice president of the Dairy Farmers of Canada, a national organization for dairy producers. Though it's a bit early to know exactly how much milk farmers dumped at this point. Dairy farms in British Columbia started disposing of raw milk on April the 3rd, according to a statement on the BC Dairy Association website. The group did not respond to a request for comment. Missing period here. Should probably have that. I don't know why I'm correcting the fucking CBC on that. Dairy Farmers of Ontario, which represents about 3,400 farms and farm producers, these measures would be necessary on a select and rotating basis. Now look, this may have been an exception during COVID, and for all I know, the market has righted itself. But any time that anyone is overproducing, they have to do this. During COVID, it was just because clearly, we saw a spike of this. So naturally, eventually someone took footage, and now we know about it. But like, you don't think that at any point there was a farmer that accidentally produced more than they thought they would? They couldn't guess how much they were going to get from the herd or from the harvest, and so move a decimal over and there was a mistake, so now they have this excess. They have to get rid of it. So like the original point, they've been dumping liters and liters and liters and throwing away kilograms of food for what? To keep the prices stable? How can we justify what is going on the streets with the homeless population, with the people going to the food banks, to the students, to single mother families, to anyone that is in dire straits right now? How could this at all be justified? I am beside myself when I read about it. The Globe and Mail did an expose on it as well. Canada's dairy farms dump 7% of all milk produced, study contends. 7% of all milk. Just gone. It might as well have just never existed. Not to mention like all the energy and everything that went into producing those products, all the animal lives, the hours spent by the farmers, all that wasted energy, like it's gone. It's just poof, gone. All those hours spent toiling, a chunk of that just gets fucking boop, just thrown away, just dismissed completely, like it never existed. It might as well have never existed. It's just a number on a ledger at the end of the day. That's the way that it's treated. It's nothing short of insane that this is a reality. And regarding the food bank usage, this is a recent report in 2024 by the Daily Bread Food Bank, which is one of the bigger food banks in Ontario, if not in Canada. They've had a 30, so this is in 2024, they had a 38% increase in use of the food bank compared to last year. 38%. That's almost half. Almost 50% more usage from a year. From before 2020, a 273% increase. Now, once again, I understand that COVID is an anomaly. This is a once in a generation, event that happens. There's going to be consequences. I understand that. But how is it that as what we consider ourselves a first-rate country, a developed nation that has existed for 200 plus years, right? No, not 200. It was 18, not 18, was that 1860? No, it wasn't 1867. What was the year of Confederation? See, I should fucking know this. That was 1867. Yeah, I was right. Yeah. See, I am a smart boy. Almost 200 years, right? Almost 200 years this country's been around. One of the most developed nations in the world, realistically. In the top 10. We're in the top 10, maybe top 20, all right? We're up there. We got some things going for us. How is this a lived reality for people? This is I have no how? How is this just a normal thing that we excuse? 1 out of 10 people in Toronto rely on food banks. Every 10th person you meet on the street, statistically, right? That's insane. That's insane. To live in such a metropolis like Toronto, and you rely on a food bank. That's crazy. We have we have an abundance of food, but it's just not getting to these people because of the monopolies, because of the dumping. We're literally throwing it away. Like, Jesus Christ, what the like, how could this be a possibility? Nobody should be going hungry, or at least extremely few people. This should not be a statistic that is making the news. When this came around, this was news in Toronto. People knew it was bad, but they didn't realize just how bad it was. Right? And the COVID pandemic wasn't the only reason that food bank usage was high. We also had an extremely high rate of immigration over the last couple of years, where a lot of people have had to resort to food banks because of the cost of living crisis, or they just want to scam the system and get food. There have been cases of that as well, right? But nonetheless, this should not be a concern that we have in Canada in 2025. It's insane to even consider that this is a lived reality for people in such a wealthy nation, such a well-off nation, right? And so on the topic of immigration, for the longest time, Canada's had this reputation of being the country with open arms that welcomed everybody from all backgrounds, right? It's something that we pride ourselves on, even to this day, right? Even with what immigration has become in Canada, this is a point of pride for a lot of people, that we are a nation where you come in and you're allowed to exist in your own cultural norms. But there is a level of adaptation, there's a level of assimilation that has to be done at the end of the day, right? That was always the caveat. That was always the unspoken agreement among people. That yes, you come here and you celebrate your customs and you have your holidays, okay. But at the end of the day, we all sing the national anthem. When June 1st comes around, we celebrate that. Right? June 1st, Canada Day? July 1st. Gee, I always confuse those two. July 1st, right? And that comes around, you celebrate Canada Day. When Canada and USA are playing hockey, you cheer for Canada, regardless of your affiliation. Right? You cheer for the home team. That was the whole thing. You got behind the home team. Right? But that is no longer the case. That is no longer the case. We've imported so many people in such a short time period that assimilation is no longer the norm. In fact, it's quite the opposite. People are now just sequestering into their own cultural groups. There's more and more focus on highlighting other cultures, and there's not a unification of a single Canadian culture. That idea doesn't really exist anymore. It's been dismissed. It's just been lost to time because people started demonizing it. Not just demonizing it. I mean, there's multiple reasons, and we'll get into that later in the show as well for the cultural breakdown of Canada. But it's been happening for a very long time now. But it's reached its, I hope, its height in the last couple of years. Right? And immigration, at the end of the day, it's a normal facet of life. There's very little that you can do to displace these people now. They're here in the country. All right, they're here. They're here to stay. So long as they're, citizens, permanent residents, what have you. Right? But that only works when people can integrate into society properly. When they learn the language, when they learn the customs, when they learn how to adapt, right? When they sign the social contract that is never spoken, but people understand, right? There's certain things that you do and don't do in polite society in Canada. There used to be a code that people would follow, right? This reputation that we have for saying sorry all the time, sorry, it's true, as people are polite. They don't want to infringe. They don't like we do it to the point where it's a fault of ours. We're nice. We care. Your neighbor's stuck in the snow with his car. You go out and you help. There's a senior citizen living near you that needs help with groceries. You go and help. That's the Canadian identity. That's the underlying social contract. Is in times of need, in times of trouble, we look to our neighbor and we make sure that they have enough food on their plate. That's what I grew up with. Those are the values that were imprinted on me. Not only because of where my parents came from and where I originated from, but because that's what we learned in Canada. Right? But that is no longer the case. That hasn't been the case for years now. And we'll just start with this little bar graph right here from an account by the name of Data Hazard, where about 33% of Canada's residential population is foreign-born as of now, which is up from 24% when Trudeau first took office. So a 9% rise in 10 years is what we saw. Right, and here's the chart. Right, and if I just remove my cam for a second, right, that extends all the way back to 1960. And you can see, right, along the graph, it's steadily increasing. Population gets bigger and immigration becomes a more favorable thing for Canada. We keep developing our infrastructure, becomes, the reputation of the nation spreads across the globe and everybody wants to come in here for opportunity. Naturally, it's going to increase. But if you look at this little red line right here, this is the time when Trudeau was prime minister. Do you see how fast that fucking climbs? You see how fast that accelerates? Right? For that exact same rate of foreign-born share of Canada's population over these 10 years, for 9% increase, so 24%, we need 15%, which is roughly just here, actually, right at the beginning of the graph. Let me just remove my cam here. Just right here, at the beginning of the graph. For that same increase from 19 to 24, which took 40 plus years, 50 years. It took 50 years for it to increase over 9%. And Justin Trudeau did that transition, what it originally took 50 years, in 10. In 10 years, we got the same percentage increase of the share of foreign-born Canadians that we did in the 50 years prior. That's fucking ludicrous. That is an absurd amount of immigrants. That is insane. Absolutely astronomical. Okay, and like this is just a graph, so I'll show you some examples of like what the impacts of this are, because they are not ideal, to say the least. Right, look at the net migration in Canada. Right, during COVID, obviously there was a dip. All travel and everything was shut down. But if we look at this rise right here, I mean, look at that. That is insane. And this is in the thousands, by the way. So when you see this 100, that's 100,000, right? So that's 1,200,000 people. Net migration going from all the way from 100,000, and even, you know what, even if we ignore that dip, from 500,000 to more than doubling it in a span of 2-3 years. That is absolutely fucking sane. And by the way, this source right here from Statistics Canada. So this isn't just somebody on Twitter, no, this is from the Canadian government. Anybody can go and look at this data themselves. And like I said, I will be providing the sources at the end of this at the end of the stream, and all the descriptions for the video there. And here's the share of non-permanent residents in Canada. So in Canada, the way that our immigration system works is that you can have, like many countries, a worker visa, and then you can also have what's known as a permanent resident card. That is a step before becoming a citizen. So permanent resident means, okay, you're here to stay, you got a health card, you got a driver's license, you have an address, you have a job, you know, you're stable, you have a life here, right? But you're still not quite citizen. You don't have the passport. And so that next step, when you take the actual citizenship test, the oath, you know, go through all your documents, get verified, all that, that's when you actually become a citizen, because that's when you actually make like a full commitment. So permanent resident is like that. That's what that status means. So non-permanent resident means anyone that's here on a worker visa, student visa, what have you. Anyone here in the country that is not supposed to be here permanently. Right? And this is a percentage of the total population on July 1st. Look at that rate. Look at the pink chart. It's steadily, you know, increasing and going up, sure. But then it absolutely fucking skyrockets. So just before this massive increase, the percentage of non-permanent residents in Canada was hovering at about 2% or so, and it went to 7. It tripled. The amount of non-permanent people in Canada tripled over the last not even 10 years. Right, so as a result of all this, because as I said, immigration is... I'm clearly not anti-immigration. I am an immigrant. I understand that, right? But when I talk about it in these ways, what I mean is, like, part of it is integration. Once again, you have to integrate. You have to accept certain things about the way the society functions. You have to accept certain things about the way that people behave in society. Certain norms, ways of life, the language, the customs, everything. You have to accept that in order to fully be part of, you know, the zeitgeist, the collective here in Canada. There are certain things that we do and we don't do, right? For instance, we don't have child brides, okay? We don't openly sexually harass women in the streets. We look after the elderly, ideally, right? These are the things we're supposed to aspire to. We respect our elders. Like I said, we cheer for the home team. Canada #1. We don't bring the conflicts and strife from abroad here. No. That was never part of the social contract. All these protests, realistically, no Canadian should give a fuck about them. Because so long as it doesn't concern Canada, it doesn't matter. You're here now. You're part of the club. You've bought in. You have a house here. You have a family. You have a job. Commit or leave. Those are the only two options. Shit or get off the pot. Simple as. Right? So those are the stakes. Right? That's what you have to live by. Those are the things that we all agree to in Canada. But now it's been possible for people to just say, oh, fuck that. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to get a job and maybe pay taxes. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll just get the experience here and then I'll leave. Who cares? Who cares? And I realize that I'm talking about this flippantly, but this is an actual fact of life now. This is the norm, right? We've had part of those that percentages that I showed you earlier of those non-permanent residents. Percentage of those people, a good chunk of them, are foreign students. A lot of them come in from India and other countries in Southeast Asia. But the issue is they came at such a high rate that a lot of these avenues through which they came to Canada through were illegal. It wasn't just because they all applied to go to, U of T or Queens or Western, and we just had a surplus of engineers, doctors, and all that. No. We had a bunch of these fake colleges pop up and start to give people diplomas and certificates and degrees or opportunities for work, when in reality, all of that was just fake. There were no classes to go to. These colleges were just literally just made out of thin fucking air. Most of the time, they were just offices with like a little paper at the front saying, oh, such and such college, such and such technical institute. And they were scams, right? And I would err on the side of saying that there's a percentage of these people that actually applied to these programs that I'm sure were coming in with genuine intentions, that they wanted to learn, or they just want an opportunity to work. I get it. If you're living in a country that is not doing so great, to say the least, right? For some of these places, in not so many words, you see a place like Canada is a land of opportunity. Of course, you would go there to benefit yourself, to benefit your family. Anybody in their right mind would do that. If things weren't great back home, if you wanted an opportunity to do something, to become someone. I understand that mentality. That's what drove my family here in the first place. So I'm not dismissing that. There's some people with good intentions that actually want to come here and socialize, become socialized in our ways, right? But there's a good chunk of these people that also just didn't give a fuck, and they just wanted to pay their way into the country so that they can get a job and start living comfortably, because it's a whole lot better than what they have back home. And so in some of these examples, right, this is an article from the CBC. It reads, an investigation by Indian officials that alleges dozens of Canadian colleges and universities might be linked to a scheme of illegally ferrying students across the Canada-US border reveals the staggering extent to which holes in the immigration system can be exploited, some experts say. If the allegations are true, it reveals shocking gaps in our integrity protocols. This is deeply, deeply concerning and problematic. Raj Sharma, a Calgary-based immigration lawyer, told CBC News Network, adding that the allegations suggest wide-scale human smuggling. Okay, that's how bad it is. It's not just because there's a wave of people. No. Wide-scale human smuggling is the word that he used there. And the article reads, India's Enforcement Directorate said in a news release on Tuesday it had uncovered evidence of human trafficking involving two entities in Mumbai after probing the Indian connection to the Patel family, who froze to death in January 2022 while trying to cross the border from Manitoba into Minnesota during frigid weather conditions, which was a thing that happened. We had people crossing in from the US border going up north to Canada in the dead of winter for some fucking reason. I guess because they just thought border security wouldn't be as tight as it is compared to the summer. Fucking freezing to death on the border. Jesus, what a miserable way to die. The Enforcement Directorate said its investigation found that 25,000 students were referred by one entity, with over 10,000 students referred by another entity to various colleges outside India every year. And this is just the instance that we know of. This is just one, right? Two of them that they caught, right? An article written in 2024, so it's been a year since then, uncovering one of these connections, right? Now let's get another article up on the screen here. If you ever want to read an article, just a fact before we go further, if you ever want to read an article that is paywalled, go to Web Archive, which is just archive.org, and type in the URL of the article, and you will get past the paywall. You'll be able to select it from previous time when it was captured, and you don't have to deal with the paywall. And so this article, the headline reads, International Student Scandal. Outrage amid reports that hundreds of Indian students in Canada could face deportation over bogus admission letters. With an admission letter in hand, this is one of those articles that goes into the whole fucking story. Quote, just how many students have been caught up in this situation is not clear. Some media reports are putting the number at 700. Yeah, sure. 700. Fucking okay. Yeah. While the Star has not been able to independently verify that figure and officials are remaining tight-lipped, the situation and the headlines it's garnering are causing a stir in communities here in Canada as well as back in India. Yeah, no fucking shit. Our rate of immigration doubles, if not triples, from a certain section of the globe. We see it everywhere these days. If you bike in the city of Toronto or any urban city, you're going to see Indians on e-bikes. You're going to see Indians delivering Uber Eats. You're going to see Indians working in Tim Hortons and McDonald's everywhere. Canadian Tire, everywhere. They're working everywhere. And now here's the problem I have with that, right? Most of the jobs that they work, because they come over here with little to no skill, little to no background, maybe they come here under false pretenses, right? Paying for a visa or what have you. As a result of that, they can only work certain jobs. You can't just get working an office job getting paid $50K a year if they can't verify your employer or if they don't recognize your Canadian experience because you don't have any Canadian experience, right? So you end up working just shit jobs. You work in a warehouse for Amazon. You end up delivering. You end up driving around in Uber. Right? You end up taking jobs that are entry-level market jobs for people that are typically younger, right? Younger people that, they just need to make some extra dough for university. They just need to make some extra cash during the summer, right? For one reason or another, they're working that job because they don't have experience either. I remember university. I worked in many bars, washing dishes and working as a cook, just doing like remedial labor. I painted houses at one point for a summer, delivered flyers, right? Just to get some extra cash. Just to have some side money to buy some weed or liquor with or what have you, right? Or save up for university. Right? Those jobs are meant for those people. Or people that are, let's say, like elderly, 65 or something, and they need a shift at Tim Hortons a couple times a week, maybe because they like the socialization, the socializing rather. Maybe it's because they just want an extra bump in their pension, and they don't mind. It's just they work the counter. They talk. There used to be a time in Canada where you'd walk into a Tim Hortons, and it was just nice old ladies and teenagers. Everybody spoke English. Everybody was nice and cordial. It was a welcoming environment. And now you walk in, half the time they mess up your order because they don't understand it. There's a language barrier, naturally. These people just came to the country. And even though India was at one point colonized by the Brits, their English isn't always perfect, depending on how, which part of India they're from or what kind of education they had. So there's a language barrier. Your order gets messed up. You're not really making small talk because you don't know this person. They're from a village from God knows where. There's no relation. And then in a couple of months, they're gone. Somebody else is taking their shift, and it's somebody else in those exact same circumstances. An international student, somebody that came here under false pretenses, somebody that's just here for a visa or what have you. There's no sense of community. All of these jobs, they've just gone away to these people that come here, and because not just because there's so many of them, but because they're willing to work for a lower wage. They're willing to work for a lower wage. They're willing to work longer hours in worse conditions because their ability to stay in Canada depends on that job. Right? When you're a high schooler and you're just going to university, you got that first summer off, or even if you're a university student or a senior, the stakes are not that high. You're already a citizen. You're already living in the country. You're not mandated to work a certain time. You don't need that because, chances are maybe you're living with your parents or you already have a place or you're saving up for a place, living with your friends or what have you. The circumstances are not nearly as serious, but it is for these people because they needed to stay in the country. they needed to make sure that they have enough work experience so that when their immigration hearing comes up, they can say, oh, I was at Tim Hortons for this long. I was at McDonald's for this long. I did Uber Eats, like what have you, right? For them, it's a matter of survival. And for Canadians before, it was just a nice to have, or I just need something on my resume. It was just a stamp. It was a verification that you entered the job market, that you did your thing. You put in your hours. Everybody's washed dishes at some point. Everybody's waited tables. It's in some ways, it's kind of like a time-honored tradition that you just do when you're young, because you have no experience in the world. Nobody's gonna hire you, paying you $50K a month or a year, unless you know somebody, and that's rare. Everybody's worked summer jobs. That used to be a thing, and it's no longer the case. It is absolutely no longer the case. In fact, for these jobs, okay, there's lines around the fucking corner for these jobs now. Because when these job fairs happen, now it's no longer just the Canadian kids in high school, university, or what have you that are competing for it. Now you're competing with all these international students. Now you're competing with all these new immigrants to the country. So the lines are long. And I made a post about this today. Let me see if I can pull up the video. There's 2 videos here, right? So just to give a little context, there's this I don't know if it's a festival, but it's kind of like our version of a county fair. It's this place called the Canadian National Exhibition Place. You got rides, you got junk food, you got clowns, like basketballs, whatever, like all these different carnival games and all that, right? We set that up in the city of Toronto every single summer. I think it goes on for like a month or 2. But it's a great thing. Everyone looks forward to it. You bring your kids there. It's a great, wholesome experience. It's fun. It's just a fun little place to go in the summer, right? And so they have a job fair that they do every year because they got to fill these positions. It's only for about a month or 2, so they're not looking for, long-term work. It's just something that you do as a kid, or a university student. You're just looking to get by, like I said.
The Canadian.
Now here's
The Canadian.
This is footage from the job fair that they had. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, right? And here they are talking about the experience that these people had in the job fair. So let's just play this. I'm gonna take off my my view there. Let's go full screen. So check this out.
The Canadian National Exhibition says it received a record 54,000 applications.
I see cashier here at McDonald's.
Job seekers here hope to be one of the 5,000 lucky enough to snag a seasonal position, typically filled by young people.
No one wants
difficult.
to accept young people. So
Yeah.
it's pretty hard.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find a job nowadays.
Indeed, it's a tough labor market for them. Apart from the pandemic, people between the ages of 15 and 24 are facing the highest unemployment rate in 15 years, currently hovering around 14% nationwide.
The people that are struggling are what we call the new labor market entrants. People who are entering the labor market to try and find a job. For them, it's really hard. It's not people are losing their jobs. It's that it's harder to get into jobs.
The Canadian.
And let's just play a second video as well. This also has to do with the hiring of the youth.
School is almost out, and so are students, many eager to snag a summer job.
Oh my gosh, I've probably sent out close to 10 resumes for around my area, yeah.
But finding and securing one is proving harder and harder for students across the country. So much so, Ottawa has announced an expansion of their Canada Summer Jobs program, which offers wage subsidies to businesses hiring young people for seasonal work. That comes with a $25 million price tag, a concern for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
This is at a time where the government of Canada is spending, tens of billions of dollars just on servicing government debt. So we're always cautious to see more expenditure at a time when, the government every year is adding on a lot of borrowing.
But there's no denying the demand for jobs is being felt here at home. A recent job fair at the Halifax Shopping Centre drew a big crowd.
We definitely saw between 100 and 150 people come out for the job fair, which is significant. We saw anywhere from high school students to certainly university and, younger grads.
But even with help, students say it continues to be a struggle.
In the summertime, it can be quite competitive, and due to my age, it's hard to find opportunities out there to get a paid job.
Another roadblock is finding a job that allows students to juggle other responsibilities.
As a nursing student, where we have a super busy schedule during all summer, and we have clinical hours, so that can make it difficult to work because we're already doing full-time clinical hours as well.
As the national unemployment rate skyrockets, job seekers of all ages are at a standstill.
My little brother trying to find just summer employment, and I have family members trying to find full-time employment that have recently been laid off, and it just seems like mission impossible for anyone to find a job right now.
Okay, so mind you, right? Those are summer jobs they're talking about, and those are in a lot of ways temporary, but that is still the case. Youth unemployment in Canada has never been this high in my lifetime. It has never been this high. Right? So like I said, people that need this experience, people that they don't have experience, so they have to build it somewhere. You gotta take out the trash. You gotta flip some burgers. You gotta wait some tables. You gotta wash some dishes. Like I said, it's kind of like a rite of passage in a way when you're young. You have to do that shitty job for a little bit just to at least understand the value of a dollar, right? And probably a good lesson to never want to do that fucking shit ever again so that you don't end up a lifer, right? All of these are important steps. Now it's just not available for people. It's just not a reality. It's not a common one anyways. To get a job now, I don't know what kids are doing now to get jobs. I have no fucking clue. I couldn't imagine how difficult it must be to find a job. I mean, at this point, you might as well just start your own business. I feel like that'd be a lot less riskier than just hoping that somebody will eventually call you back for a job application. It is absolutely mental that we are putting our youth through this, and we are letting people that are willing to work for lower wages take these jobs. It is insane, ludicrous that this is even a possibility, that this is even happening. But of course, it benefits the businesses. And recently, like when I made this post, this was in response to Tim Hortons. They finally put out a release saying, hey, relax, okay? Because in this post, they basically said, at Tim Hortons, we believe every team member deserves respect. Recently, we have seen troubling incidents of hateful behavior, both online and in our restaurants, directed at people based on assumption about who looks Canadian. This is unacceptable. No one in our restaurants or in Canada should ever be harassed for who they are. Across the country, about 100,000 team members work in 3,800 Tim Hortons restaurants. We're incredibly proud of their hard work and of the restaurant owners who provide meaningful jobs for so many people, including young Canadians entering the workforce. Right, and they included a stat at the bottom that says more than 95% of Tim Hortons employees are hired locally. Now, what do they mean by that? Because there's a little caveat. There's an explanation here. So they said 95%, right? I read that right? 95%? More than 95% of Tim Hortons employees are hired locally. And here they defined local employees at Tim Hortons to include Canadians born here, new Canadian citizens, students, seniors, permanent residents, international students being the key word here, and people with valid Canadian work permits being the even more key word here. So they consider that local? Somebody that's here for their first year in Canada and they have a work permit to work for Tim Hortons? That counts the same as a citizen? Really? What kind of fucking Jedi mind trick bullshit is this? Do you really think that people aren't going to read the fine print? That people aren't going to see this? That people aren't going to highlight the part like, hey, yeah, no, 95% of our hires are hired locally. Also, when we say locally, this is what we mean. You know what? People hate the Toronto accent, but I'll say, are you fucking blem, fam? Are you fucking blem? Are you insane? Are you out of your mind? Are you out of your fucking gourd? That you think this is acceptable? Are you serious? Tim, like, for those that don't know, Tim Hortons is like the Canadian staple. It's like the coffee shop. It's where you have your first date. It used to be a place where you can come after school and socialize. It's the place. You just want some average shitty coffee, like a normal breakfast. Yeah, that's where you go, Tim Hortons. Where they used to, growing up when I was a kid, they baked everything in house. They made everything in house, just about. You know, there's some stuff that they get off the trucks, certainly. You know, it's like McDonald's, but Canadian, right? But now they have like all these pizzas and all these ingredients. It's all turned to shit because they also got bought out by another company. It's not even Canadian owned. Tim Hortons was a hockey player who I'm pretty sure played for the Leafs, I think. I'm fairly certain. Let me just make sure because I don't want to be talking out of my ass here. Because Tim Hortons, this used to be a fucking staple. Okay. Tim Horton, who played in the NHL, yeah, majority of his career playing for the Leafs. All right, so I wasn't wrong on that. I passed the Canadian shit test. Right? Tim Hortons was the place. It was the place to be. And I'm not saying that in some extravagant way. It wasn't fancy. But that was the place where you'd go after school. That's the place where you'd go. You're walking with your parents and it's a cold winter day and you walk in and get some hot chocolate. You know, that it was old reliable. That's what it was. Yes, the coffee was shitty. But you didn't care because the donuts were great or the service was nice. It was just a nice place where you could go and warm up when it's minus 20, minus 30 out, which is for a good chunk of the year, depending on where you live. It was a nice homely place that you could go to, and now it's just turned to shit. Now, whenever Tim Hortons commercials come on, I just get a feeling of disgust because what they make is shit. Now they've been bought out by another company. It's no longer Canadian owned. When they display symbols of Canadian pride because they're trying to make money off the Canadian image because they are iconic. It is an iconic brand. You know, it's Canada. That's what we grew up on. But now whenever I see them trying to use the image of Canada to fit their marketing needs, I don't feel a warmth. I just feel disgust. It's gross. Not to mention that during COVID, Tim Hortons, they have a summer camp that they hold for kids every single year. They kicked out non-vaccinated kids from this summer camp. And their summer camp isn't just like, oh, I'm just, parents have some kids and they just want to sign them up. No. They would go for they would target people that were at risk of being homeless or kids that were dealing with diseases, right? Incurable ones. Make-A-Wish shit, essentially, right? Like the Ronald McDonald House. In the same way. And during COVID, they denied entry to non-vaccinated kids. How fucking heartless is that? Whatever your stance on vaccination, because first of all, that shit did not. This is an aside. I'm not going to get into COVID right now because that's a whole fucking can of worms that I do not want to open at this moment. But whatever your stance on it, to deny kids entry because of like a choice that they don't even have any control over, it's heartless. It's beyond heartless. Right. And for that reason, for many other reasons, I boycott Tim Hortons. I choose actively to not go there and spend my money, as everyone should. Right. And as I'm talking about all these things about, why Canada is in the situation that it is now, as you may think to yourself, what are some steps I can take? One of them is boycott. I understand that a lot of our economy, as I said before, is based on monopolies, but wherever you can choose to spend your dollar, or better yet, to not spend it and to put it into something else, make that choice. Because companies understand that. Okay, when the Bud Light, Bud Light blockade, as we can call it that, the Bud Light boycott, when it happened, they listened. They changed their tune. They understood that if they didn't turn things around, they would lose a whole lot of more fucking money and brand recognition and all that. That's why they have Shane Gillis and what's his face, Post Malone in their ads now. We have to do that to Tim Hortons. We have to force them to stop fucking sell. They sell pizzas now. For what? No. No, disgusting. Just get back to making decent donuts, hiring local Canadians, and not kicking kids out of your fucking charity summer camp because of a choice they have no control over. Insane. This brand is a shell of itself. I'm absolutely appalled at what it's become. I'm not even like a diehard fan or anything, but it's just like I hate them using the Canadian image in their advertising as if they're still Canadian. They're not even Canadian. They're owned by some American brand that also owns Burger King or some Brazilian brand. Like it's not Canadian owned is the point. It's not even Canadian owned, and it was started by a hockey player. The most Canadian thing ever. A hockey player started a business and it went fucking gangbusters. How is that not a story of success that we champion? And we just let it get bought out. I mean, not much that the average everyday person could do, but I'm saying as a nation, we let it happen. So anyways, Tim Hortons is just one of the examples of brands that are doing this. So yes, boycott brands that do not hire Canadian, that do not source locally. Absolutely. Fuck them. Okay, Canada first all the way. You don't get to use the image of Canada for your own needs and purposes. You don't get to just parade the flag around whenever your shareholder value is not high enough. Fuck that. Get that shit the fuck out of here. That's not Canadian. No. Not at all. So that's the that's how immigration affects the jobs in a short little rant. I realize that we took a little side case with Tim Hortons, but that's been a long time coming. Tim Hortons fucking what a disappointment. What a disappointment. One of my favorite things that I just grew up on. That was the place to be. And now it's a fucking shell of itself. The chance that you can walk into a Tim Hortons and see a guy doing the fentanyl fucking doubled over high as fucking God knows whatever opioid is fairly high if you live in the city. Or just skeezy activity happening outside of Tim Hortons. One time, you know what? Just as a quick aside, one time I was headed to work and I saw a guy ODing outside of a fucking Tim Hortons. I didn't see a lot of that when I was 8, when I was 10, when I was 12, when I was 16. Didn't see a lot of that. That only started happening recently. And if that's not a picture perfect photo of what Canada looks like now, I don't know what is. So just to pivot here a little bit, right? With the immigration stuff, not only is the job market now affected for the youth, but just the job market overall, right? Housing obviously is gonna, be affected by this because immigrants need housing. Where are you gonna put them all? We have a massive influx of them. We got 2 times, 3 times as many people in the country now. Well, not many people in the country, but the rate at which they were coming was increasing by 2 or 3x, right? As we saw in the graphs before. And this is what we saw. Because we have the same amount of space. Houses were not getting built fast enough. And so what ends up happening is the same supply of housing is now being used by even more people. So people just start getting crammed into fucking basements like there's no tomorrow. And I'm not even, this is not hyperbole. Okay, this is the mayor of Brampton. One of the main hubs of this immigration, because Brampton has a very high percentage of their population is Indian or Indian descent. Right? And so a lot of people that come from India, they go to Brampton because they want to be with their own. They want to speak their language. They understand the customs. That's where they feel familiar, right? And this is what the mayor of Brampton said.
You're going to be taking in 5,000 international students that have a plan for where they're going to be housed. Just a few days ago in Brampton, I got a report from Bylaw where they found 25 students living in a single basement apartment. Right now, we see international students living in fire traps, extremely dangerous living conditions. And if the colleges took the time to build student housing, we wouldn't have that issue. And so I really want to see an alignment with the international student visa approval process, that there would be a housing address associated with it. So if you have a plan to pay for tuition, there should also be a plan to be able to pay for proper housing. If you're
Okay, so notice that he's putting the onus on the universities, which is fucking crazy. Like, he should absolutely be blaming the government. But I guess he doesn't want to ruffle any feathers about anyone in the federal government. He doesn't want to go against Trudeau, because this is at the time of Trudeau, before Mark Carney. When he said 25 people to a basement, he did not misspeak. That was absolutely real, and is a lived reality right now. I don't know if it's nearly as bad, because we did kind of peak like in the last 2-3 years or so. Now it's getting a little better, because they are starting to deny visas. They're starting to deny work permits. They're starting to lower the amount of immigration. A lot of people that come into the country. Not nearly at a fast enough rate. The people who have expiring visas, I'm pretty sure the number right now is at least 3 million. And we haven't gotten a clear answer as to whether or not the government is going to like actually enforce it and deport these people when their visas expire, which they should. That's the minimum that they should be fucking doing, right? But here are some examples just to highlight to you what the housing situation is like in Canada. All right, when you're looking for an apartment these days, this is some of the stuff that you might see. That's 3 mattresses on the floor in a room. And you're paying $400 to share a bathroom with 3 people in a room. 3 people. Sorry, 2 other people. So you, yourself, another person. $400 a month. Cheap as fuck. Yeah, why not? Of course. Of course. And here's yet another ad. 7 very friendly men looking to befriend and roommate young female only. You know how many ads I saw like that when I was looking for an apartment? That's fucking creepy, man. That's fucking creepy. Why are they looking for a woman? Woman only. 7 men. For what? And you might think this is Photoshop. No. No word of a lie. I saw posts like this all the time on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace and apartments.com, everywhere. You couldn't escape this. This is, like I said, I'm going to show you guys. I have receipts. There's more of these. Here's another one. Room available for girl and sharing with boy. Good behavior. Girl must know cooking. Rest of work boy will do. Washroom is in sharing and kitchen also. Do you think some Canadian wrote that? You think some Canadian that's been here for generations, or even like a first-year immigrant is going to write that? Somebody that has a permanent residency? Really? No. Fuck no. This is some guy from God knows country. Chances are it's Indian, because we immigrated tons of them. We let millions of them in, right? Let's be real here. Let's be transparent. That's where they came from. And most of these people this is the ad that they're putting up? Female only? What the fuck? How is this normal? Here's some more. Here's some more for you. There's tons of these. If you are curious, you can find plenty. Okay, here's a Reddit post that somebody wrote. Just ridiculous. Sleeping under a bed. I can only stay here from sleeping between 11 and 8 a.m. Plus, I have to share with 14. Yes, 14 other people in the same unit. And it even specifically mentions it only fits a smaller person since the space below a bed is not that spacious. Such madness. $920 a month to sleep under a bed. And you can only sleep between 11 and 8 a.m. How is this real? If you try to find this Reddit post, now it's deleted. Chances are because of the amount of fucking hate that it got. A lot of it racial, I bet. But this is a lived reality. This is real. This is Canada. And I understand this isn't all of Canada, and it's not all out, plenty of people living out in the boonies don't have to deal with this. But for those living in the urban centers, this is what they have to put up with when they're looking to rent an apartment. This is an ad that they will see. And depending on their situation, if their economic situation is not looking all that great, they might consider it. Let's see another post. And you know what? It's not just happening in places like Toronto and Calgary and Victoria and all that. No. It's happening in fucking Sudbury. Sudbury, okay? For those that don't understand, right? This is the scale of Toronto, right? This is Toronto proper. as I like to call it, right? You got all the downtown, midtown, right? Anything up to Eglinton is basically Toronto. If you go up further in the East End or the West End, you're talking about the boroughs, the Mississaugas, the Bramptons, the Oakville, what have you, right? But this is basically Toronto, as we know it. This little circle here, right? And Sudbury, I mean, look at the size of this sprawl. Technically, in the GTA, all of this is Toronto. It's fucking huge. It's an urban sprawl. Now look at Sudbury. It's a town in fucking almost center of Ontario with what? Most of this is mining. It's a mining town and you have like cities and life built around it essentially. It's nowhere near the same. And yet they were faced with the exact same issues as Toronto was. According to this article, quote, Sudbury homeowner frustrated that homes on his street have multiple tenants. A Sudbury, Ontario homeowner says he and his neighbors are frustrated with some shared housing on their street, saying up to 10 people are living in one suburban home. It made it all its way to Sudbury. You had to go all the way up north from Toronto. Like, do you realize the drive you would have to make to get here? And they chose to settle there. Like, the housing crisis is that fucking bad that people are clamoring inside of homes in Sudbury. Right? And I understand this is one article. People can say, oh, this is just a one-off. No. This is happening across the country. If you double, if not triple, the amount of people that are coming into your nation compared to the last several decades, now all of a sudden you have this population boom, they're not just going to be settling in Toronto because eventually Toronto's just going to become too competitive. They're going to be going fucking everywhere. I have it on good authority. I know somebody who met one of these students at an airport out west. And as they were walking past, just made a comment like, hey man, you're going to need a winter jacket. It's like -20 right now. Where's your winter jacket? And he's like, oh, I think it was from Ghana or something, from some African country. And so the person, they asked him like, you're from Ghana. What are you doing here? It's like the middle of winter. He's like, oh, I'm an international student. I'm studying geography in such and such university. Yeah, you came all this way from Africa to study geography because everyone knows that the best place to study geography is Canada. We're world renowned in our study of geography. This is one of the things that we're known for. In the dead of winter, the guy doesn't even have a winter coat, can barely speak a lick of English. They are going everywhere. These immigrants are settling anywhere and everywhere they can. Because like I said, anyone in their position would. If you have a chance to go to another nation that has running water, electricity, a police force, laws, social norms, right? Recycling, certain amenities that you don't have in your country, because that's where these people are coming from. For anyone that's unfamiliar, like I'm not even talking shit on India or any of these places. This is just a lived reality. If you have ever seen, for those that don't know, India is one of the worst places when it comes to throwing out garbage. They do not have like the same processing quality as we do in terms of the infrastructure that we have for the garbage, the recycling, the green bins, all that. They do not have that. They have rivers of garbage. Their most polluted river, this is what it looks like. Like, this isn't even a stereotype that I'm relying on. If you just look at footage of what it's like to live in, I mean, look at this. They do not have the same quality of life as Canadians do. It shouldn't even need to be stated. Anybody that knows anything about the world can see that. Right? So when these people come here, they're going to go anywhere that has opportunity. Eventually, Toronto's going to fill up. They're going to go to Calgary or maybe out into the east, into PEI or what have you. So this housing thing, it is not localized to just urban centers. This is happening everywhere, everywhere, in small towns and large. It's happening across the country. Let me see if I can find another one of these wonderful posts. Oh, here it is. Here's another ad. This is not a room, this is a space created in a basement. Wall of storage bins create a privacy wall between you and someone else. There is half bath in the basement, shared kitchen, full bath, living room, and dining room with 3 roommates, including his heat. I don't know what HW is. Power, Wi-Fi, laundry, and outdoor parking space. No pets, no smoking. Anyways, the ad goes on. But like this is what people live in when they come to the country. Some of them, anyways. A good chunk of them. Right? And even in my own experience, when I was looking for an apartment, not the one that I'm currently in, but a couple years ago, when the housing market was just absolutely fucked, I showed up to a viewing of a basement unit that could not have been more than 100 square feet. Like, I'm talking tiny. I'm talking you walked in, you had the bed, you had a 6 by 6 inch cutout of a window. The ceiling, I was almost too tall for the ceiling. And I'm not even like, I'm 6'1, 6'2. I'm not like extremely tall, but I was almost hitting the ceiling. Forget stretching your arms. No, my head was almost hitting the fucking ceiling. It was tiny as hell. When I walked in, there was a couple walking out of that viewing to see that exact same unit. And by the time that I finished with that viewing, by the time that I got out, 3 other people were in the street. 3 other people. This was a hot unit. People were vying for it. And that wasn't even the worst place that I saw. No, actually, no. That probably wasn't one of the worst places that I saw. But when I was looking for an apartment initially, my God, I knew that Toronto had the reputation of just having absolute, like, horrendous conditions when it comes to housing, especially if you can't afford to live, or if you have a hard time making rent or what have you. But even just for the average person, holy fucking shit, it was. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was that bad. I mean, just the quality of some of these places. Honestly, most of them are basement. I'm lucky to have found the place that I now have, so I'm living above ground, and it's a world of a difference. Because I ended up living in a basement anyways. The place that I found, it was decent, but it was still in the basement. It was still in the basement, and I was paying 3 times as much rent as I did when I lived as a student. When I had split another place with a friend of mine, I was paying 3 times as much rent. And I understand that Toronto is not the same as the city where I lived before. I get it. Toronto's the exception. It's not the rule. But Jesus fucking Christ, the percentage of my rent of my income that goes to my rent, it is way more than I'm comfortable with. It is crazy. It is crazy expensive. Toronto's easily one of the most unaffordable places to live. And part of it is because, once again, going back to immigration, we imported more people than we could house. So all the housing that was available, all the housing stock that was available, it became scarce. There was a higher demand for it. And so people started to squeeze into these basements. They still are to this day. Like I said before, they've kind of slowed down on the immigration, but not in a significant enough way. There's still plenty of people coming across. Right? So these conditions still exist. There's people right now, as I'm talking, that are living 5, 6, 10 people to a basement. What the actual fuck is that? That's a hostel. That's an unfortunate rooming situation that you have to make once, and then you move on. That's not a life. Could you imagine doing that for months on end, for years on end? Do you know what that's like to not have personal space? Like you might as well just be in a fucking open air prison. That's fucking awful. Could you imagine coming to a country and you're hoping for opportunity, the land of opportunity, of milk and honey? I know the U.S. coined that, but Canada has some good benefits too. But could you imagine doing that? Like you're looking to start a dream. You're moving out of your village, your hometown, wherever you're from, the city, whatever your conditions are, and you come to this new place, a place that you're sold on as the nice, welcoming country. We're nice. That's what Canadians are known for. We're nice. That's it. That's our global reputation. That's what it is right now. And we're not even all that nice these days. But you come here and then this is what you have to live in? Travesty. Absolute travesty. I can't believe that new immigrants, these are the conditions they have to subject themselves to. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Right? And to top it all off, apparently a quarter of new immigrants to Canada are looking to leave anyways because of how bad it is. Right? At least according to Ipsos, 26% of newcomers report that they are likely or somewhat and very likely to leave Canada within 2 years. 2 years. Just 2 years and they're out of here because they can't handle it. Or it's not what they thought it was going to be. And I've seen plenty of footage of people getting interviewed in the street and saying the exact same thing. It is not what they thought it was going to be. I work with people that are new to the country and they tell me that exact same thing. Not necessarily that they want to leave, but that it was not what they were expecting. It is not the dream that they were sold on. And that's a fucking shame. That's a fucking shame. Because regardless of anyone's opinions on immigration, like I said, this is something that's going to happen. This is a natural way of life now. Okay? The age of settlers is gone by. Now it's just immigration. That's all that it is. There's no new lands to be discovered. But the fact that people that come here, they don't even have an opportunity to work a decent job, to earn a decent wage, to have a decent quality of life. And notice I'm using decent. I'm not saying excellent. I'm not saying amazing, stupendous, enriching. No. I'm just saying decent. I'm saying an apartment with maybe 300, 400 square feet. The bare minimum. A studio. To split with your family while you make ends meet and then work your way up to something better. That's not even possible anymore. Or if it is, it's possible for a very small percentage. An increasingly smaller and smaller percentage of people are able to live a life that comfortably. Most people are working 2 jobs, if not 3, just to make ends meet. Because our beloved ex-prime minister, who's now dating Katy Perry for some god knows fucking reason, Justin Trudeau, or otherwise known as Justin Castro, for his likeness resembling that of Castro, because he wanted to see the GDP number go up? Because he wanted to appear nice to his voters? Because they wanted to change the demographic of Canada so that the people coming in would vote for the Liberal Party? Because they'd rely on their benefits? For these reasons? Really? That's what you sold us out for? That's why kids can't... That's why, citizens can't get jobs in the summer? Senior citizens can't get jobs to help their pension? That's why when I was looking for an apartment, I lived in a basement? You're telling me that was the justification? Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you for making me go through that. Fuck you for making my family go through that. My friends. The people I grew up with. My neighbors. Everyone that's affected. Even the new immigrants. Fuck you for that. Not fuck the immigrants, but fuck Justin Trudeau and the government for making people go through that just because they wanted to appease the voters. Just because they wanted to buy votes. They wanted to push people en masse into the country so that they could get around to their way of thinking. Fuck you for that. Fuck you. Unbelievable. They sold us out, and for what? For what? Economy's in the shitter. People are going to food banks at a record rate. There's no social cohesion in Canada. People are turning to their tribes, to where they're from. They're protesting in the streets for conflicts that Canada has nothing to do with. And for what? So you can get votes? So you can get higher tax revenue? Fuck you, is what I say to that. Right, and so that's on the immigration front. There's a lot more to say, and I'll do more episodes on that, but that was little intro to that. Like I said, there's a lot more with immigration that I could cover. It goes further than that. This is just the cliff notes that I'm giving you guys. Okay, this is just the bare bones introduction that you need to understand what's going on in Canada, and I haven't even covered like a good chunk of it. Okay, but it's coming. It's coming. That's what that now we are here. This is a Canada First podcast. We are Canada First. And you know what? Before I go into the next topic, and I think I'll end off with this topic because this one's quite long. There was a moment in time, and I'll be honest, there was a moment in time during COVID when I saw the country at its craziest, where I was considering making a lateral move to the U.S. just because I saw that as the last bastion of freedom. I thought that, well, if I can get treated as a second-class citizen in my country for being a taxpayer, for being a law-abiding citizen, I never committed a single fucking crime. I always followed I went to school, I went to university, I followed the rules, I learned the language, I adapted, I did everything they asked of me, and still I get fucked. During COVID, the people that were unvaccinated or weren't fully vaccinated, they couldn't travel out of the country. We were effectively prisoners in our own country. Sure, you can go to a different province. Sure, you can go to a different city by bus. Not by train, though. Couldn't go by train. Couldn't work in most fields. Still can't work in a lot of fields if you're not vaccinated. They did all of that. All of that subjugation, all of that pressure they put on regular everyday citizens like myself who had never broken a rule. I bought into the social contract. Okay, I believed in a vision for Canada. I wanted to see it thrive. And they didn't give two shits. They didn't care. So I said, you know what? Fuck it. Why don't I consider moving to the States instead then? Why don't I just do that? Because at least they're, maybe somewhere in Texas or Florida or what have you, at least they don't have to follow by the government's rules. At least they have some independence. Because here, all the provinces, all the municipalities, all the politicians, they all bowed down to the government. There was some slight pushback on things here and there, but realistically, it was never strong enough to actually change the way things were. It was never strong enough to change the course of life for a lot of people. They still followed the rules. They still got the passports. They still forced the restrictions. Even the Conservative Party, they did nothing. They did nothing to save us. You know what? No, that's not fair. They made some attempts to stand up on the rights of Canadians, but the Liberals, they had too much power. They didn't give a shit. They could do whatever the fuck they wanted. They had carte blanche when Trudeau was in power, essentially. Because Trudeau was also supported by the NDP. Because, the one thing they say about Canada is, at least you have, multiple political parties. That doesn't mean shit. That means fuck all. Because in America, you think, it's only just the left or the right, the Democrats or the Republicans. It gets tiring. Maybe you'd want some options. It doesn't matter. Because the NDP, they made a coalition. They joined forces with the Liberals. They supported their government. They made a deal. So if the Liberals passed some of the motions that the NDP wanted passed, if they passed some of the laws the NDP wanted and some of the social programs, then they'd support the Liberals, no matter what. And that's what they did for all those years. Or a good chunk of those years anyways. And they fucked us. Any decent citizen that just wanted to be left the fuck alone by their government, just wanted to live their lives, maybe start a business, maybe start a family, get a job, what have you, during COVID, all of that was taken off the table. All of that. Fuck you. Is what I say. Fuck you for doing that to me, to my loved ones, to my friends, to my community, to my country. Fuck you. So now onto the topic of the cultural and moral fabric of Canada and how that got eroded. I'm just take a quick little sip because that was a powerful rant. Before we end off the show, well, it'll be a little bit before we end it, but once again, if you guys want to support me, like, subscribe, comment, follow me on X, all the socials. You can always find it at bio.link/whitepill. We'll include the link in the description there. That'll be the best way to support me. And ultimately, if you do want to help financially support me, we got that PayPal link there too. If you want to donate, we read donations at the end of the stream. But at the end of the day, I'm just happy that people are watching this, if anyone is still. So, to get into the moral and cultural fabric of Canada, this is a wide and varied topic, so I'm just going to touch on a couple of the scandals or stories that are kind of emblematic of where we are as a nation. The chief among them being the residential schools. So, for those unfamiliar, when Canadian settlers were, they formed the union, all the provinces, there was a question of, well, what do we do with the natives? Because there's tons of natives on these lands. We can't just kick them out. They're staying. What do we do with them? And one of the solutions that was thought up was these residential schools, where native children were forcibly taken from their homes by the Catholic Church and Canadian government officials. They were taken to these schools. They were just like wooden shacks. Let me just see if I can pull an image of one of them up. Not always wooden shacks. Sometimes they were like, these brick buildings. But essentially, this is what residential schools were, right? And they were chiefly, in charge by the Catholic Church and people that worked for them. And so the reason that these schools were a thing, the reason that they were made, is because the idea was we're going to civilize the savage, right? And not so many words. They were going to take kids, force them to forget their language, to learn English, and then to also be taught in the ways of servitude, because back then they believed that natives were not equal to the white man. They believed that they were lesser, and so that they must be made into a servant class, so that once they make it out of residential schools, they can go, work at the shoe shop, at the cafe, the diner, what have you. And their whole thing was supposed to be a permanent servant class. That was the objective, to make them subservient to the whites, right? Just as clear as day, that is what the residential schools were. Now, like I said before, they were forced to forget their language, and they were ripped away from their parents. So they're living at these schools. They're essentially boarding there. Mistreated, obviously. Cases of rape, where kids were also trying to escape the schools. There's a famous story of these two kids that went on trying to follow some train tracks in the winter, and they both froze to death. There was a famous, I believe it was Gord Downey who wrote a song about that. I could be wrong though, but there was a famous song about that. And so this is how the Canadians treated the natives. This was one of the things that they did to them, right? And so this is a history that you learn growing up, going in school. Like, obviously, initially you learn about the tribes, who's a hunter, who's a gatherer, all that basic shit. But eventually you learn some pretty nasty things that the Canadian government did to these people. And there is absolutely no excusing that. There is no dismissing that whatsoever. Right? That is a reality that happened. In order to understand Canadian history, you have to understand that part of it. Right? But everybody learns it at some point. And yeah, it's I guess embarrassing isn't even the word for it, but it's a shameful chapter of Canadian history that we did this. But if you understand the history and the context of the time, you can understand why these things were made. Any rational person is not going to, hear me say that and think, oh my God, he's excusing residential. No, this is just, it's a natural progression of history. This is what happens. When you take over the land, when you conquer a land, you conquer the people on the land, and you force them to live by your rules. This happens throughout history. Every tribe, any civilization that is advanced enough, that is conquering new lands, has done this to a civilization. They've eradicated them. They've raped them. They've stolen from them. They've taken from them. That is the history of human civilization. This happens everywhere. Canada is not unique in this regard, right? And that's partly what's wrong with the way that we understand residential schools. Is that here in Canada, we were taught, this happened, right? This is a lived reality for a lot of people. There's people that are still alive that are survivors of this program. But in 2019, there was a finding near one of these schools that initially was presented as unmarked graves. And the entire world lit up for a moment. That at some point, they made the case that at some point, I think it was 215 was the initial claim. 215 unmarked graves were found in one of these residential schools, which implies the story that these kids were getting taken out the back and getting fucking old yellered. Just a cap in your ass. Just absolutely fucking pump and dumped. Like they had a lineup of these kids just getting blown out. Clip that. No, don't clip that. Right, like that's the image that it portrays. That you might as well just like had fucking gas chambers for them. Right? If you had 215 kids die at a single residential schools, what does that mean for the other schools? What does that mean for any of these other places? Right? And that was the initial story. And we had a national moment of reckoning. Justin Trudeau went to one of these sites with a teddy bear and he kneeled for a solid, God, I want to say it was 5 or 6 minutes. The news was on him. Oh, what a moment. What a tragedy. So sad. How could you possibly think otherwise? During COVID, we got to come together. We got to come together and recognize we fucked up, Canada. We fucked up. Even though none of that generation is alive now, we fucked up. Me, you, Bob. We all fucked up. Right? That was the story that we were sold on. This shame and this guilt, this shared grievance among Canadians. That we were all in a way responsible for this. That's what we were sold on. Right? In 2021. This is what we were told. You know what it turns out? None of those fucking graves were a thing. Nothing. They found nothing in those fucking graves. Right? The story of the 215 exploded, and then they started going to other residential schools and finding other what they thought were graves and burial plots. Yeah, it turns out it was fucking nothing. To this day, the government has never come out and acknowledged this. Nobody in like major news, they still think this is a real. They still think that it's real. That those bodies were just, we're not going to exhume the remains. How disrespectful is that? No, we would never do that. No. Those are real bodies underground. We know. We have the scanning technology. We scanned the ground. Yeah, that wasn't fucking true. It was all a lie. And I understand that in Canada right now, this is a conspiracy theory, right? I understand what I sound like when I say that. But like I said at the beginning of the stream, I have receipts. Okay? I have receipts. So here's the Fraser Institute that comes out with a report saying that there's no evidence of mass graves or genocide in residential schools. Not 2 years later, 3 years later, sorry. 3 years after the story broke. Right, so here it reads, on May 27th, 2021, Roseanne Casimir, chief of the Kamloops Indian Band, announced that ground-penetrating radar had located the remains of 215, quote, missing children in an apple orchard on the site of a former residential schools. Politicians and media seized on the announcement, and stories of mass unmarked graves and burials of missing children ricocheted around Canada and indeed much of the world. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau set the tone of public response by ordering Canadian flags to be flown at half-mast on all federal buildings to honor the 215 children whose lives were taken at the Kamloops residential schools, thus elevating the possible burials to the status of victims of foul play and making Canada sound like a charnel house of murdered children. Right, flags were ordered at half-mast people were wearing orange all the time. I don't know. I don't understand why there was an association of orange. I think it's just it must be a color in the native culture um, that signifies death or rebirth or something. I'm not too familiar with it. Honestly, when all of this was happening, I could smell bullshit. It seemed a little too fake because the politicians were a little bit too gung ho to accept it. It seemed like virtue signaling to me. So I don't know much about that, but yeah, orange was everywhere. Orange shirts were being sold everywhere. You saw like little orange bow ties being tied everywhere. And you know what? Sorry guys. Let me just take a quick break and we'll get right back into the story. Just give me 1 second and we're back. Apologies for that. I just had to step away for a second. So I vividly remember when orange was just everywhere. This was getting world coverage. This is one of the first few times that Canada actually made the news globally, right? Globally. And not for a good reason either. This was certainly not the reason why you'd want to wind up on the news. And so the politicians made a big hubbub about it, obviously. This is a chance to get in front of the camera and say, oh my god, Canada's colonial past, what the fuck were we thinking? Unbelievable. What a crime. What a crime against these people. What an absolute travesty. We have so much to atone for. The white guilt. Oh my god. My heart, I can't take it. Right? All of that played out on national media for months on end. Months. Wall-to-wall coverage. And if you were in any way skeptical about it, good fucking luck. Good fucking luck having friends and being skeptical around them. You might as well have been an anti-vaxxer. You might as well have been a Trump supporter back then. That's the reverence that people would have looked at you with. Maybe reverence isn't the right word. I don't think reverence is the right word, but that's how people would look at you. It's like you're wearing the scarlet letter across your chest. You were branded if you didn't go along with it. You were ushered out of polite society if you didn't go along with this. Right? Even though the nature of what they said was we found 215 unmarked graves. Right? And not just that. Not just 215 unmarked graves. Let me see if I can. They started with they found 215 kids. Right? It was a hysteria. Right? It even reached the fucking Vatican. The Pope made a visit to Canada. I'm pretty sure that same summer. Or if not that summer, then the summer after. To make a formal apology to the natives. Which was the most performative fucking thing ever. The Pope has to apologize for what? What did he do? What did he personally do? Boy, he just sits on. He's the high head of this organization that has been around for thousands of years, but he has to atone for this sin? What a fucking embarrassment for the church to do that. Because at the end of the day, what percentage of the if you want to tell me that, okay, let's say if they did it like this. If the Pope said, all right, we're going to run an internal investigation. We're going to find out which of these people are still alive. And we're going to, hold a trial or hold them accountable or have them come in for an apology. That's one thing. At least getting the people that perpetrated this responsible, I would at least respect that a lot more. But no, it's the Pope himself. He's a figurehead. Because here's what happened. He came in, he did his fucking apology tour, and he dipped. And guess what? The natives are still exactly where they were. They're still living on their reservations. Some of them don't even have access to clean drinking water. A good chunk of them are alcoholics, not only because they don't have the gene to process alcohol properly, but because there's nothing to do on those reservations. The kids don't have access to schools. And I'm not just speaking out of turn. I know somebody very close to me that flew in between reservations because reservations, they don't have like the roads and the infrastructure that cities do, obviously. For those that don't know, these are remote places. You have like an airstrip, maybe a road leading out of it, but you're essentially disconnected from the rest of society. right? You don't have public schools. You don't have a police force. You're out in the fucking country. You're relying on your neighbors, on your family, on your friends, your community, right? And they have their own tribal system set up with the chiefs, and there's a bunch of funding that gets sent their way from the federal government, and I'll get into that in future episodes. But just as like a little cliff note, that's the way they function. And from the person that's close to me that did all these flights, that told me all these stories about what it's like on the reservation, and from other people that I've learned from, my anthropology professor in university spent some time living in one of these reservations. A box of craft dinner, which in the city will cost you maybe $2-3, something like that, just some shitty fucking macaroni and cheese. In a reservation, because of how hard it is to get supplies up there, it's going to cost you $10, $20, $30. Because that's how expensive it is to get food up there. So they have to incorporate that into the cost of the item. And these people, there's not a Tim Hortons down the street they can work at. They get their stipend from the government, but like what opportunities do they have? And to what extent that's a responsibility of the government of Canada, to what extent that's a responsibility of the chiefs and their local government, I will hash that out in later episodes. But for now, this is the lived reality of natives. So they're living in these conditions, right? And the Pope comes in for an apology, and he leaves. Of course he's going to leave. He's got the fucking Vatican to run. He's got a church to run. But these people are still living here with these same conditions. What did that apology do? I'm sure it meant something to the victims. For a moment, maybe. But realistically, like they're still living in destitute conditions. And I'm not even like saying that my tone is not meant to convey some sort of pride in that or anything. I hope I'm not trying to come off as that. Or joy that they're living in these conditions. That's awful. Nobody in Canada in 2025 should be living like that. Having to worry about their clean drinking water? What the fuck are we talking about? We're a G7 country. We're a developed nation in 2025. Everybody should have access to clean drinking water. It's not even a question. Right? Which is why this whole missing children thing threw me for a loop, because I was like, I don't understand. So you're willing to use the struggle that these people went through as some political football, but you're not actually willing to do the work to correct this wrong. You're not willing to actually put in the effort to make it so that these people have proper infrastructure. You're the leader of the country. What are you doing? No, it's a lot easier to just just go to a field and kneel by a teddy bear. That field, mind you. So that's in Kamloops, right? So recently, there was an investigation that somebody did. I think I forget which the organization. I'm not too clear on the details, but they did an investigation, and in 2024 they found that this is part of a sewage field. This is part of a sewage system that they built years ago. So those deposits that they found, that ground scanning technology, it was shit. They literally found shit. Or whatever was in the sewage, right? But I'd imagine that shit is a part of it. And if you look at all these maps, right, the septic field and everything that they drew, and I'll include a link to this so people can actually check it for themselves, but it was just sewage. It was just sewage. This whole thing was built on the fact that there was a field of sewage. How unbelievable is that? All of that strife, I didn't even mention this. Oh, here's a little fun fact for you. That same summer, for that year and afterwards, dozens of churches burnt across Canada. Because this was the summer of George Floyd, or around that time anyways. Right? This is the summer of anti-colonialism. This is the summer that people went out and protested. They tore down statues. They changed names of streets and universities and roads that were named after the people that built this country. They tore all that down as a reaction of their hatred and anger towards the colonialist history of Canada. because of stories like this of the 215 unmarked graves, and find out years later that it's literally shit. Do you realize what that does to a country? Do you realize? Like, all of that was built on a lie, on an outright lie, and nobody has come out to correct the record. Nobody. Not the national media, not the government. Nobody has come out. Not even the Conservative Party. They have not made a concerted effort to come out and say, hey, all of that outrage you guys were building, all of that destruction, all those churches that were burnt, it was for nothing. It was for less than nothing. It was for shit. Literal human shit. And if you don't believe me, you think I sound conspiratorial, like I said, I have receipts. I'm going to include this report. You guys are more than welcome to read it. But it says here, like, based on these plans, this is all sewage. Right? And here's another article for you. Failure to find bodies ends Canada's inquiry into mass burials at church-run schools. The Canadian government has halted an inquiry into claims of mass burials of children at former church-run residential schools after not one grave was discovered. Claims of the abuse and murders of hundreds of Indigenous children have triggered arson attacks, vandalism, and the desecration of about 120 churches across Canada. They burned more than 120 churches in Canada as a result of this outrage. Just let that sink in for a moment. How fucking crazy is that? What an insane reaction to a story that was built on a lie perpetrated by politicians who wanted to seem like they had the moral high ground. I mean, it's like the same thing in the United States. You know, here in Canada, whenever we have a bill passed in Parliament, they name it Bill C-19, C-18, C. They do that for a reason. The reason they do that is because they made it a law so that when you pass these bills, you can't just put like some controversial name, because that would color people's opinions on it, that would change the perception of it. Like how in America, you have the Patriot Act. Who would vote against the Patriot Act? If you vote against it, you're not a patriot, right? So people make that mental association in their head. Who would vote against the Save the Babies Act? Oh my God, you want to kill all babies? Meanwhile, it has like subsidies for BlackRock or whatever the fuck, right? Just as an example, right? This story was treated in the same way. How are you saying that Canada didn't perpetrate violence against Native people? How dare you? How dare you reject that? That's the response that people were met with. When anybody at any point showed any opposition to this, and I experienced this in my personal life. There were people close to me that I tried to broach the subject with and tried to explain to them, like, hey, this actually doesn't seem all that right. It doesn't look like they actually found these 215 kids. It actually looks like they haven't exhumed a single body. They haven't found any remains. They haven't found anything. In fact, they're just going around making this claim nonstop and getting mad at anyone that disagrees. And I could tell, like, the pullback that I got from that, the response that I got from that told me everything. People fully bought into this. They were all in on it. They were fully invested. People believed in this. They breathed and lived this for years on end. And this is the lived reality that we had. Right? This was the thing at the time. This was a consequential moment in Canadian history when we finally had, right, this is the narrative that they sold us on. This is the reckoning. This is when finally people learned the truth about Canada, just how pervasive that system got. That's what they were met with. When in reality, all it was literally a pile of shit. Literally and figuratively, a pile of shit. That's what it was built on. And like I said earlier, the worst part of it all is that the native community in Canada barely gets any news attention here, unless there's like some kind of scandal or a crime being committed on their territory. There's not really, like, unless you watch the native news, and they do have a channel called, I think it's APTN. Unless you watch those news, you're not really familiar with what's happening in native communities. Every now and then you'll hear about a water advisory or something like that, but could you imagine like what it was like for those people to go through all that, to have their aunts and uncles, maybe even their dads and moms that went through those residential schools, that were forced to forget the language, all the pain and suffering all those people went through? It was used as a political football. It was used as a grievance trophy for the people that were willing to kneel and to wear the orange shirts and to take up their cause only for the time being, only while it served them. Could you imagine how much hatred and anger those people must have for the Canadian establishment, for the Canadian citizens that were at the parades, that were at the protests, that were at the Pope's apology tour? Could you imagine how absolutely livid those people must be? The people that understand that there wasn't anything found, that they got fucked over twice, that all of that painful history got brought up again. And for what? Who benefited from it? What did they actually achieve? There's still communities out there, like I said, with poor access to fucking clean drinking water, to education, to jobs, to basic amenities like healthcare. They're still living in those conditions. The Pope came and went, and nothing changed for them materially. Nothing. Maybe they got some extra benefit or stipend or whatever the fuck, but those people are still living in the exact same conditions they did, or basically the same conditions as they did 10 years ago. And all of this got brought up for what? To serve a political purpose? So that people can go to parties and talk about how good they are and jerk themselves off? For that? Really? It's fucking disgraceful. It's fucking disgraceful, and anybody that still holds this belief to this day, they are not aligned with Canadian values. Anybody that actually believes that this happened and refuses to see the actual truth of it all, because like I said, I have receipts. I've presented you with reports and articles that show you that this is actually not the case at all. And you know what? Even if you don't believe me up until now, even if you only read the CBC and you don't believe them, here's an article from the CBC. No evidence of human remains found beneath church at Pine Creek Residential School site. So here's one of the few times the CBC actually admitted this, right? here's one of the few times the CBC actually copped to this. One of the sites that they alleged that there were so many bodies at, nothing. Quote, no evidence of human remains has been found during the excavation of a Catholic church basement on the site of a former Manitoba residential school. Chief Derek Nepanak of the Menegozibi Anishinaabe shared the results of the 4-week excavation in a social media video Friday. He said the outcome takes nothing away from the difficult truths and experienced by our families who attended the residential schools in Pine Creek. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. Because those people still went through that. Even without this whole hubbub of the 215 kids and all, those people still went through that. That was a lived reality for them. We have to recognize that as a part of our history. No shit. We're all in agreement here. We're all on the same team. But the moment that you start forcing this shit on us, the moment that you start telling people if they don't believe in this lie, that they're anti-Canadian, that they're conspiracy theorists, that they're residential school denialists, fuck you. Fuck you and the horse you rid on. Going further in the article, 14 anomalies were detected using ground-penetrating radar. Wow, again, ground-penetrating radar. In the basement of the church on the site of the former Pine Creek Residential School last year. Survivors had spoken about horror stories in the basement, of which I have no doubt are true. To an extent. Potentially. I don't know. I haven't read the stories. I don't know. But I'm willing to take people at their word if they say that horrific shit happened there. I'm willing to extend that olive branch. Because why the fuck would anyone lie about that kind of trauma? Why? The First Nation, northwest of Winnipeg, hired an archaeological team from the University of Brandon to do the excavation earlier this summer. It is the same team that assists police on archaeological digs and excavations in the province. So they had a whole fucking thing. And they didn't find a single body. And mind you, this is just one of the schools where they made the claims. Fine. But here's an official source stating that, right? And not just this, but at one point during the recent election, right? Let me pull this up because this is when it becomes genuinely real. Okay. CBC ombudsman rules on CBC anchor lying about residential school bodies. So the CBC, our national broadcaster, our state-sponsored media, right? Our Pravda, as the Soviets had it. One of their anchors made the claim while accusing Rebel News, a third-party news outlet, of misinformation on residential schools and anti-Christian sentiment. She claimed that Rebel News claimed that no human remains had been exhumed or confirmed at these sites. And Barton lied. She said, yes, there actually have been remains. And the CBC issued a correction, a very rare correction, right? And if you go into that correction page, you got to scroll all the way down because they don't highlight this. They don't play this on the news. No. They secretly add this to their page and you got to look for it and find it. So if we scroll down and I just look up residential, here it is. On April 16th, during a live broadcast following the French-language federal election leaders debate on CBC News Network, chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton said, quote, yes, there have been remains of Indigenous children found in various places across the country. Quote. So that's the end quote. As CBC News has reported on multiple occasions, what several Indigenous communities across Canada have discovered on the sites of some former residential schools are potential burial sites or unmarked graves. So at no point in the news story there do they say, no, 100% there have been bodies found. No. They say potential burial sites and unmarked graves. Potential. So even the CBC that pushed this shit for years on end, wall-to-wall coverage, the Pope's visit, they had the fucking 360-degree angle. They were covering it day in and day out for years. Even those people that have journalists stationed across the entire country couldn't confirm that they did find bodies. Okay, this is the final nail in the coffin. This flew under the radar because this correction was made, and like I said, nobody paid attention to it. You had to be on like Twitter or just following people on social media to get this, but they just silently added this correction when in the middle of the national broadcast after a political debate, when a lot of people are watching the CBC, right? The anchor just straight up just an offhand comment. No, there have been bodies found. They did actually they did find some. So that's actually a lie. That's a lie. She literally lied. And then they just issued a correction and then they moved on. Like it was nothing. Our hands are clean. Our hands are whatever. Yeah, we're just gonna go along with it. So all these years later, 120 churches burned. How many people were fired, lost their jobs for not believing in this fucking hoax, right? How many of those people just disappeared out of public life? How many of those people were ostracized? How many people lost friends and loved ones? Just lost connection to them because they didn't believe in the big lie. that children were massacred en masse in Canadian residential schools. Which, once again, I can't even believe that I have to say this. Obviously, those people fucking struggled. That's what I started with. That's what I started this whole thing with. Not just struggled, they were taken advantage of. There were plenty of cases of rape, physical assault, legible cases. If you see any of this testimony where people, like, they have these hearings and the natives come out and they speak about on this, it is painful to watch. I couldn't imagine what that's like to have your child ripped from you, taken from you, forced to learn a different language. Forced, not integrated, not asked politely. No, forced, forcibly ripped from their homes. And they have to go through that and live through that experience and survive it and not kill themselves. I have no frame of reference for what that's like. And I do not pretend to even understand a fraction of that pain and what it takes to go through something like that and to survive. Because those people are survivors. Okay? Even acknowledging that this is what happens naturally as a consequence of colonialism, that this in part built the country that we all enjoy now, this is the lived reality. We have to understand that this happened. We have to accept it and move on. Right? We have to acknowledge it. But not in the way the Canadian government did, not in the way the CBC did, not in the way the politicians did. They lied. They lied to every single one of us. And anyone that disagreed with a lie, anyone that disagreed with the great big lie, was made into a social pariah. They were not to be associated with. And not only that, but there was a politician in the NDP party that tried to pass essentially a blasphemy law so that you couldn't deny that this happened to people. Now look, however people feel, like I said, about what happened in the history and all that, it is your right. I believe it is your right. If you want to deny all that and say it was made up and it wasn't actually 6 million, it was 7 million. If you want to believe in the conspiracy theory that this actually didn't happen, it was made up, the natives were actually treated really nice, if you want to believe that, by all means, that is your God-given right. If you want to have a difference of opinion. Now, I might think that that's a stupid fucking opinion. I might disagree with it. But that right should not be taken away from you. It absolutely should not, because that's where it starts. It starts with the kooky shit, it starts with the crazy shit, and then eventually, it creeps into regular everyday beliefs that people disagree on. But there was an NDP politician, right? Let me just, because this is the show where we show the receipts. Let's quickly look this up. Let's fact check this, right? Was there an NDP politician who wanted to outlaw anyone questioning residential schools? Right? Blasphemy laws in 2025. Could you imagine that? What a thing. And here it is. Right? Here's the most trusted source in Canada. CBC. Quote, bill before Parliament would outlaw residential school denialism. What the fuck do you mean outlaw? An outlaw an opinion? So if I disagree with your narrative, if I disagree with the history, I can face prison time for it? Really? Really? That's where we're at in 2025? This is the Canada? This is what my family came here for? So that if we disagree, if we have a difference of opinion, if I believe in conspiracy theories, I can go to fucking prison? What the fuck are we talking about? What kind of a country does that to its own people? To persecute people for a difference of opinion. Now look, this bill never got passed, as far as I know. Yeah, neither bill has passed. They remain in first reading stages. Critics argue it risks stifling debate on incomplete evidence like graves drawing Holocaust denial parallels. Excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. Because if this law passed, me just talking about this right now would be a fucking crime. Which is insane to think about. Okay? That is fucking ludicrous. That me just going on a podcast with what? There's like fucking 7 viewers right now. If even half of those are fucking bots, if not most of them. If you are real, I appreciate you listening to this, but chances are that I'm just talking to bots, right? But that would constitute a crime. Go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself and the horse you rode on. You rode in on. Sorry. it's about 3 a.m. So we're getting past that time. Or not 3 a.m. I think it's 4. Yeah, it's 4 a.m. Jesus. We're gonna wrap this up soon. Don't worry, guys. But just to end off that whole point, right? There's a real history of residential schools that did happen, and we have to recognize that. And we all went through school, and we saw parts of it. If you went to university and you took some courses in it, you got a little bit of a deeper dive. The history is extensive. These people absolutely got fucked. Okay, there's no denying that. But to say then that this claim of 215 kids, which was never found, that is the absolute truth. We have to believe in that truth. And that when 120 churches burn, like, no consequences. Nobody was found to be guilty of that. Not that I heard anyways. They didn't catch any of the arson suspect. They didn't place additional security around the churches. They didn't do anything to protect them. Some of those churches have been standing there for decades and nothing happened to them. And all of a sudden, because of a lie, they get burned down for what? Most of those churches, the people that perpetrated all that, they're dead. They're dead. Those churches that stand there, they're not even standing for that anymore. They don't stand for that way of life. They don't view the natives like that. And yet they got burned? For what? All that history. All of that. Just further eroding the social fabric of Canada. And for what? So that politicians could get up in front of a mic and sound nice and sound good? That's what we did? That's what we sacrificed all that for? That's why we had the Pope visit? Really? In Canada in 2025, this is the best that we can do? This is reconciliation? And to top it all off, here is the ultimate sign that shows you that these people, Trudeau, Carney, they don't give a shit about you or me. They don't fucking care. They do not give two shits, okay? That same year, right, Justin Trudeau came up with this holiday, well, this day of remembrance, right? The Day of Truth and Reconciliation, they called it. Right? They made it a national holiday, a national public holiday. Except in Ontario. I think you still have to work. They made it a holiday first of its kind. A day to remember the painful history, the painful past, the shameful past of Canada's treatment of Native peoples, right? That's what we were sold on, right? So the first year that they had this holiday on, the first year that Justin Trudeau instilled this, you know what he did? You would think, right? He would, go somewhere, make some speeches, maybe meet with some Native groups, maybe go to the original site where these things were found, the scans and all that, right? Because this was still at the peak of it all. You would think, right? No, he was on fucking vacation. He decided to go to the beach with his family. That's how much they care about you. That's how much they care about the whole thing. It's all a fucking act. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a shit. They will stand on the graves of those people. They will stand on their shoulders and use them for leverage to get ahead by any and all means necessary. That's what Canada's become. And it fucking pains me to say it. Because, God, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that these people are in power, that we let them get to the power, that we let it happen. We let it get this far. To the point where the people in the highest of office, this is how they look on us. This is how they treat us. What a fucking disgrace. Unbelievable. Because look, at the end of the day, Justin Trudeau, he has people around him all the time telling him what his calendar is, what his schedule is. His whole life as prime minister is planned out. You're telling me that the night before the holiday that he invented himself, he isn't having thoughts of like, maybe I should show up to an event. Maybe I should speak to people. Like, it's not even in his mind. No, he just went on vacation because they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about the natives. They don't care. They don't care. And the Liberal Party stood by him when he did that. All his supporters stood by him when he did that. And they elected the Liberals again with Mark Carney, despite the fact that this happened. 120 churches burned. All those native people still living in their fucking shit conditions. And for what? So that Trudeau could add a shiny little prize to his lapel, so that he could leave a legacy of truth and reconciliation. What a fucking joke. Don't make me laugh. Unbelievable. This guy went on fucking vacation. Here's photos of him on vacation, by the way. Look at that. Oh, he's having a great time, isn't he? With his then wife. Yeah, before they split. God, you know, part of me thinks that this was like the reason that he missed that day. This is just my headcanon. This is just what I think. I think that their marriage was so on the rocks at that point that Trudeau had to make some kind of a grand gesture. So for his wife, I forget her fucking name. For his wife, he was like, you know what? I know tomorrow's an important day for my people and for the nation, but for you, honey, anything. We'll take that flight. We'll go to Tofino. We'll take the kids, stay by the lake. That's what I think happened. I think their marriage was so shit. He was trying to make a grand gesture to show her just how much he cared for her. I'd miss that just for you, if that is even true. But regardless, whatever his motivations for it, what a fucking disgusting individual. Absolutely disgusting. You bring up all that painful history. You make Canadians go through that. You help incite the burning of 120 churches by talking about Canada's painful history as a colonial nation. Yeah, every nation is a colonial nation. There's like a handful of them where the natives live now. Almost every single one of them had a tribe that came in and colonized them. That's the history of the world. That's how this all works. That's why we have roads. That's why we have lights and electricity and running water. It's colonialism. That's how the whole world order worked at one point. So to isolate Canada as some uniquely evil example of this, fuck off. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a second. Every nation did that. Every culture has participated in slavery, in a subjugation of the people that came before them. Every culture has done that. And if they didn't do that, then they had it done to them. You don't think the natives had slaves? You don't think that before Canadian settlers came? Well, they weren't Canadians, but English, French, German, what have you. Before all those settlers came, you don't think that the natives fought amongst each other over land? You don't think they did that? Come on. Don't make me laugh. Unbelievable. So yeah, that whole chapter was fucking, oh my god. You know what? I'll put it to you this way. Here's a personal little anecdote. I remember on that day, I was meeting up with my close friend. We were going on a bike ride somewhere. I was biking downtown through the city, and on the way to our meetup spot where we were going, I remember biking past a group of. First, it was like a group of maybe 4 or 5 people. They were all wearing the orange shirts. They were all there in their regalia. They had all the bow tie or the ties and everything on their hands, and they're like, "Yeah, hell yeah, man! All those kids, we're not gonna forget those kids." Dude, they were out to a party. I could tell they were fucking drunk. They were making it a social event. That holiday was an excuse for them to get drunk and try to get laid. That's what a percentage of the population treated it as. And that wasn't the only group that I saw. I saw multiple groups as I was biking by that was like that. And look, I'm not saying that, obviously this is everyone. No. No, but there's always going to be a subset of the population that's going to use events like that just for their own benefit. And the fact that the whole thing was built on a lie and that nothing came of it, Native people's living conditions did not improve in any significant way after this whole fucking debacle. 120 churches burned, all those people demonized, ushered out of polite society. For what? For political gain? So we can have this nice photo of Justin on the beach? Fuck you. What an absolute betrayal of Canadian ideals. Because real reconciliation, if that actually happened, right? If they actually did find those bodies, and we did have a national moment, right? If we actually did have a reckoning, if there was a coming together of sorts, and we actually saw some change, wouldn't that have been just the most absolutely positive thing ever? You know, faced with a painful memory of the past, the nation gathered and decided to pay it forward, to make it so that not only does that never happen again, but that they actually help each other. So more infrastructure gets built. People help natives integrate into society. Like there would have been a more, like, I don't know, some kind of initiative to help these people out permanently. Nope. Nope. Just used as a podium. The whole thing was just a fucking podium so these politicians can get up in front of everyone and say, "Oh, how sorry they are for their colonial past. How sorry they are to be white and from a colonial culture. Oh my god, how sorry they were." Fucking embarrassing. So, as a result of this, not only did you have 120 churches burned, we're just gonna kind of run through it here because I do not want to go for much longer. We've been going for almost 3 hours now. We'll do a quick little summary. The fallout of this, because those churches were not the end of it. That was not the end of it. This cultural feeling that we had, this moment, it still hasn't ended to this day. This is still, like I said, a commonly held belief among people. If you were to poll people in Canada, residents and citizens alike, I guarantee you there's a good chunk of them that still think this is a true fact because it's never been repudiated. Like I said, the CBC never came out with a correction that was public. No major journalist came out and said, you know what, actually, we were wrong. We were wrong. No. No major person in the government has come out. The Conservative Party barely talks about it. Even the people that you would think would be against this kind of shit, they barely talk about it these days. It's not even like it's not even a main issue for them, which is insane. Because they're not doing enough either. But here's the thing. So as a result of that, a number of things happened. Number one, being that a Trudeau-appointed librarian ordered a purge of online historical archives. So Canada's top librarian personally directed her staff to wipe federal websites of content she deemed offensive. According to a Blacklock's reporter, Chief Archivist Leslie Weir told employees at Library and Archives Canada to purge thousands of pages, including a biography of Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald. That's like asking, for an American example, that's like asking for them to burn the biography of fucking George Washington. Okay, like, how fucking ridiculous is that? Right, and I quote, "We need to discuss having a disclaimer on the website about having content that may offend people. I feel very strongly in that," quote, Weir said in an email on June 9th, 2021. Another quote, "Much of the content on the Library and Archives Canada website reflects the time at which it was written. We understand much of it is outdated historical content that no longer reflects today's context and may be offensive to many. This is an enormous undertaking with over 7,000 web pages." So she tried to wipe all that shit, all that history of Canada, all of it, just to what? Like, make sure that it's not offensive? So she was appointed by the Liberal government. Her salary is $250,000 a year. A fucking librarian. Chief librarian, mind you, but still, $250,000 a year? Who took an all expenses paid trip to China in 2019. That's weird. That's just weird. That's just weird. That's weird. That's, of all the countries to take an all expenses paid trip to, why China? Why? Why? It makes no sense. You're making $250,000. Why wouldn't you pay for the trip? You don't have enough money? What the fuck are you on about? And so, some of our coworkers, the people that were instructed to do this, they had a quote here. Quote, "The only direction we received from Leslie was offensive content," said a manager. So they're just wiping historical data because it seems fucking offensive. You're literally erasing Canada's history, or trying to anyway, because it seems offensive. It's our history. We have to live with it. We have to understand the reality. If we start erasing our history because we don't like the way that it looks, what the fuck is the point? How can we learn from mistakes? How can we advance in any significant way if we're just erasing all that embarrassing shit? Let's just get rid of it. Let's preserve this perfect image of Canada where we did nothing wrong. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? How can you be in a position where you're paid $250,000 and that's your way of thinking? That's your philosophy? That's your approach to the job? That's fucking mental. You should be in an asylum if you think like that. Okay, you should be involuntarily housed and monitored 24/7 if that's your way of thinking. Right? So that's just one of the things. They literally tried to erase our fucking history, okay? And then that wasn't enough. No. It wasn't enough to erase the history, or at least to try to erase the history. I don't know how many of those documents she tried. But then they started renaming shit. So Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, they renamed the Parkway in Ottawa to Kichi ZB McCann. And if I go on Google Maps, that is what it's named as. So if I type in Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, right? If I look that up right now, it's called the Kichi ZB McCann. So imagine you're giving directions to somebody first time in Ottawa. They're not going to know what the fuck that is. How the fuck do you even spell that? God forbid you have an emergency. You have to call 911 and you have to tell them where you're at. Oh yeah, sorry. I saw a car crash on the Kichi ZB McCann. What the fuck are you talking about? And who does this even benefit? Oh, good thing we renamed the highway. Oh, thank God. We renamed the parkway. We renamed the road. Man, I bet those natives that are living on their reservation, some of them that don't even have access to clean drinking water or adequate education or decently affordable food, I bet they really love this. Really? This is what reconciliation looks like? We rename shit now? We wipe off history because it's inconvenient, because it's painful? What kind of pussy behavior is that? That is absolute pussification. That's a bitch move. That's a bitch move. That's a coward move. That is so cowardly. Own it. Own the fact that this is what Canada was. This is what Canada was built on. Not as a sense of pride. Oh, we conquered those natives. That's a whole other fucking conversation. That's taking it an extra step. Right, but recognize that and understand that that's a part of the history. That's what allowed Canada to be where it is because of men like Sir John A. Macdonald doing what he did, uniting the country. That's no small feat back then. Are you kidding me? Could you imagine what kind of life that guy lived to have seen a country unite under him? Do you understand the historical significance of that? Nope, let's just wipe it. Let's just wipe it. Yeah, let's just wipe that all away. Fucking lunatic behavior. These people need to be locked up. I swear to Christ. The fact that the Conservative Party has not come out in any significant way against this and has not made moves to counter this. I mean, look, for all I know, I haven't been paying it like too much attention in terms of the opposition to this, but the fact that they haven't like made this a campaign promise, we're going to rename everything. We're going to move it back. We're going to take all that and we're going to reclaim it. We're going to put it back to the way that it was, because that's what it should be. Sir John A. Macdonald is a foundational figure in Canadian history, and to remove him like that is fucking disgraceful. You are shaming the Canadian heritage by doing that. You are failing to recognize the most fundamental forces of history. You think you're God or something? You think you can just play with ultimate forces like that? With time and all the work that people put into that? Really? You think that you're better than that? You think that you're perfect? This is the perception that they have of themselves? Fucking embarrassing. Here's another example. The Patullo Bridge. Renamed, like, what even is this? What, like, Stalawisem? What the fuck is that? What does that even mean? Who is this helping? Oh golly gee, we got a bridge named after some native word. Oh great. Who does that benefit? Once again, the politicians get up in front of the podium, they get to say how accepting they are of all this. Meanwhile, like how does the condition of native people's lives improve in any way because of this? How does this actually fix any wrongs? What does this do? This is so pointless. This is so self-masturbatory. I can't. This is disgusting. And the worst one by all there have been many renamings, but this is by far the worst one because this has nothing to do with native people. And in Toronto, we have this famous square. It's called Yonge and Dundas. It's called Yonge and Dundas, and I refuse to call it by its new name because it will always be Yonge and Dundas for me. And it should always be for time immemorial. Because Dundas helped build Canada, whether you like his history or not. And people have plenty of reason to dislike him. Sure. By all means, I understand and I respect their right to do so, and I respect their opinion or their ability to have an opinion on that. Okay? But Yonge and Dundas, that is the main square. Okay? That is the place. That's our Times Square. Okay? There's a diagonal crosswalk where people walk at night. It's kind of cool. You see all the ads and everything around you. It's great. It's a cool little place. Before all the crime and shit hit this area, before all the crack pipes and everything, before all the street vendors and all that, all those years ago, right? This was a cool place to be. All these cool ads, these big stores. This was our Times Square. And they renamed it Sankofa Square. Sankofa is a word in Ghanaian or Ghanan. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I apologize in advance. But it comes from the Akan tribe of Ghana, which means learning from the past to build the future. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? I'm not even aware of a large concentration of people from Ghana in Toronto. There's not a little Ghana in Toronto. It's not a thing. What the fuck does this have to do with anything? They didn't consult the people on this. There was no vote on this. This cost millions of dollars because they had to rename so much shit around the square. Not just the signage, but everything. All the branding, all the places that have businesses there, they have to get new business cards. They have to put up new branding. They have to change their website. They have to change everything to appease this. To appease this renaming. And for what? For Ghana? I can't even pinpoint where Ghana is on a fucking map. At least I can point to a reservation. At least I know where the natives are or who they are. I can point them out in a crowd. I've never even met a person from Ghana in my fucking life. What does this have to do with Toronto? It's insane. It is categorically insane to think that you're in any way in the right if you're supporting something like this. This has no bearing, no grounds in reality. This is taking it to the extreme. And I sincerely hope that enough people are pissed off about this, as I am, that there's going to be a change. And you know what? For a fact, I know there's going to be a change. Because one way or another, you can't just erase history like that. You can't just change the name of a street, of a square, or whatever, and just be like, okay, that's fine, that's history. No. No. That's not how that works. You're not the arbiter of truth. Nobody is. It's something that we agree on collectively. And this is not the collective truth. No. This is a couple of activists in City Hall in the mayor's office that wanted to push for this. This does not represent the majority of Torontonians. People still call it Young and Dundas, okay? People still go by that. And they will for time immemorial, because that's what it is. That's what it was before all this bullshit, and that's what it's going to be after. And you know what? Just to cap it off, because I had a lot more points, and we'll finish off with these handful of stories, and we'll end off the stream here. In Canada, it's very common to do a land acknowledgement at city council meetings, at just meetings in general, school board meetings. I've even heard this in school board meetings for a school board. What the fuck does a school board have to do with land acknowledgements? No clue, right? So they've been doing land acknowledgement for the longest time. Anytime before a show, before a movie starts, this is everywhere. This is the rallying cry of progressive leftists in Canada. They do a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we stand on the land of the Anishinaabe or the Mississauga or whatever fucking tribe their land is on, right? And this is the thing. If you're acknowledging that the land used to belong to someone else, but now you occupy it, that's kind of a fuck you to them, huh? Isn't that kind of saying like, yeah, we know you used to own this land. We know. We know. Hold on one second. Hold on. We know you took this land. We know we took this land. We know. Yeah, we're aware of it. We're not giving it back. We know. Right? That's the attitude that I think it just shows. You're not actually doing any benefit. You're just telling the people, yeah, we took your land. What about it? What are you gonna do about it? Right? That's basically what it's doing. So there were a couple tribes out west in BC that were like, okay, fine. We'll call you on that claim. And guess what they did? Guess what they did? Guess what they did? They fucking called their bullshit. Native tribes in BC, in the BC Supreme Court of Cowichan, they decided that the land claim that these native tribes made, right, as a result of all this culture of post-colonialism and all these children that were found, all this hysteria about it, all these land acknowledgements that were happening, native tribes are like, all right, you know what? We'll call you on it. We see your bluff and we call it. And now there's been a ruling by the BC Supreme Court which could upend land rights in Canada. Like, this is yet still to be decided. It's still getting litigated in courts. This is very recent. And the fact that this isn't receiving wall-to-wall coverage across Canada blows my fucking mind. Absolutely. Because we're talking about land ownership, okay? That is one of the most fundamental things, one of the most fundamental aspects that you have in a society. That's what creates stability. My ability as an investor to know that this land, government owned or otherwise, is going to be here tomorrow, right? It's got to be backed by something. It's got to be backed by the dollar, by an army, whatever, by a guarantee, by some kind of land title. I have to have a guarantee as an investor that this land will be here tomorrow so that I can safely invest in its future. If I want to build a condominium, if I want to build a school, if I want to build this, if I want to build that, right? As an investor, right? I need to have that level of certainty, or at least like a percentage of it, so that I know, the land is going to stay, up for sale or in the government's hands. But I got to know where I stand, right? So when the natives called their bluff, now they're putting property rights into question for that entire region. And not just that entire region, but across the country. Because if this case gets settled in a certain way, this could set a precedent for the entirety of Canada. If this goes through the courts and they find that the natives actually have a claim to that land, how many other tribes across Canada are going to look at that and be like, let's take back that land? Fuck it. You guys keep saying that you stand on our land. You keep saying it, so why don't we just let's claim it? Why wouldn't we? You said you massacred my people in all these residential schools. You tortured them. You ripped them away from their families. You subjugated us. Canada has a painful colonial history. Well, we'll call you on it. Why not? This is real. This is real. Okay, and here's the consequence of it. Because like I said, I bring receipts. All right, I provide receipts. There was a condominium developer that is no longer building a condominium in that area because of it, because of this ruling. So here's the article. An Ontario company that put down a deposit to buy a luxury hotel in Richmond, BC, pulled out of the deal worth tens of millions of dollars weeks later because of uncertainty caused by the landmark Cowichan Tribe's Aboriginal title ruling, according to the marketers of the property. They were going to build a hotel, and the project was going to be worth tens of millions of dollars, bringing all this tax revenue, bringing all these jobs to the region, and that got halted because of this land acknowledgement legal case. This is the state of Canada. Okay, just to end off the podcast here. This is the state of Canada. Okay, when I grew up, none of this was even a reality. We knew that residential schools were an abhorrent thing. We knew about the treatment of the natives to an extent. We had a very light education because public school only gets to so far. They don't really get into the nitty gritty. You don't really learn that until you're an adult. But now native tribes can just potentially lay claim to land that they don't own because a civilization that was greater than them came by, settled the lands, toiled the lands, built the lands, worked the lands. All those ancestors of all those people that built the railroad, that did all of that work to build all of it, undone in a single ruling. This is the country that I live in, and a country where millions of people can be welcomed and flood the job market so that Canadian youth, citizens and non-citizens alike, permanent residents and whatnot, can't even get a fucking summer job. Right? And this is only the third issue that I wanted to discuss in Canada, regarding Canada, right? I have plenty more, which I'm obviously going to have to leave for a later episode, but this is just the third issue today. Right, tonight we discussed the monopolies, the fact that people are getting fucked over by pricing, the carbon tax, right? All the food that we're dumping, all the milk that we're dumping in the middle of a cost of living crisis, the fact that people are living 6 to a basement in some cases, right? All of these issues. This is not the country I grew up in, okay? This is not nearly, remotely anywhere close to the country that I grew up in. It has changed in ways that I never expected it would. And I'm genuinely, every other day when I talk to somebody that's, that doesn't live here and I explain this to them, I feel like I feel sane, actually. I was going to say I feel like I'm crazy, but no, I have a sense of sanity because they actually acknowledge when I tell them this crazy shit, they're like, wow, that's insane. I can't believe that Canada is actually doing this. I can't believe the politicians are doing this. I can't believe that there's enough social pressure from the average everyday citizen that supports this kind of shit for this to even become a reality, a shared reality. Their disbelief gives me a sense of sanity because most of the people around me, most of the people in this country, they believe in this. Okay, they believe that we have an inherent guilt to us because of what happened to the natives, because of what we're doing to Mother Earth, because of this, because of that. They feel guilty, and they think that this is the solution. This is what will absolve them of that guilt. If we just pay enough carbon tax, if we just let enough churches burn, if we just acknowledge that there's hundreds of kids that are actually shit in a field, if we just acknowledge these lies, maybe we'll feel less burdened. Maybe we'll feel less guilty. That's the prevailing attitude of a good chunk of Canadians these days, and it's shameful, to say the least. It is absolutely disgusting. It is a complete rejection of what the Canadian identity was as I knew it growing up and what it should be in the future. And like I said, we're gonna close it off here. So, the Whitepill project, yeah, we are pivoting to Canada first. I'm gonna be producing a lot more stuff on the idea of Canada First and what it means to be Canada First. And I am going to do my damnedest to make sure that the state of life of that Canada was in when I was growing up is something that can be enjoyed by future generations, because this right here, what it is right now, this ain't it. This is not it. It's not sustainable. We're getting taxed out the ass. Government spending is at an all-time high. The cultural fabric of this nation has been eroded to a point that I never thought it would be. It is absolutely disgraceful what we've become as a nation. As a developed nation living in 2025, with the capabilities that we have, with the natural resources that we have, with the engineering might that we have, we are falling short, to say the least, of our capabilities and what we could be. Canada can be a bountiful nation with great abundance, rivers of milk and honey, opportunities galore. We do not need to be suffering in these ways, and people are suffering. It's just you don't see it as often. It's in the quiet things. You know, it's in your grocery bill. It's an extra couple bucks. Oh, whatever. So it's a couple extra bucks. Doesn't matter. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Oh, okay. So I guess I gotta wear orange one day of the year. Whatever. No big deal. I gotta do this or I gotta do that. You know, we make concessions, but we've made too many. We're too nice. And like I said earlier in the podcast, we're too nice to a fault. We did this to ourselves. We allowed the country to deteriorate in this way. No more. I say no more. Fuck that. Fuck that. No. I refuse this vision of Canada. I refuse that this is the reality that we have to live in. No. This is going to change. And I'm going to do everything in my power to change it. And so I thank everyone for taking the time to listen tonight. I thank everyone for having the patience to hear me out on all this. And like I said, there's going to be more episodes like this. We're going to be covering more of these issues in the future. This is going to become a more Canada-centric stream. On occasion, we'll cover international stories if they're interesting enough. And I understand that while most of this episode has been blackpilling, the white pill here is that I know I'm not alone. There's tons of people that are turning around, that are coming to this side to understand the reality as I've presented it. And I'm not saying that as if as if I just read the news wrong or I just believe in conspiracy theories. No. What I mean to say is that the reality that we've been force-fed through the CBC and through our politicians and through social conditioning by those around us and the institutions that we're a part of, all this, the raising the flag at half-mast, the holidays, everything that's been done. Tim Hortons putting out a press release saying they hired locally. All that is just, it's fake. It's a facade. Not only is it fake and a facade, it falls apart under scrutiny, under the lightest of scrutiny. Right? So all of this stuff that they are saying, this idea of Canada that they're presenting, under the slightest of scrutiny, it falls apart. Anybody with just enough patience to read through some Canadian history and understand the values that built this nation and why those need to be preserved, just with that minimal amount of work, you can get to the conclusion that this what we're living in right now, it's not right, to say the least. We are not living up to our potential. We are not living up to what we could be as a nation. And we all deserve better. Because there are some decently horrific things happening to people every single day in this country that we are ignoring or choosing to look away because it's inconvenient or for one reason or another, they're happening. No more. No more. We need to put an end to it. Because if we keep going this way, we're not going to have a united nation. We're not going to be Canada. And I quite enjoyed Canada growing up. I loved it. It's my home. This country has given me everything, so I have every reason to be thankful for it. But if we are to preserve that vision of Canada for future generations, we have to change something, and this project is going to be part of that change. So, once again, I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you for tuning in for as long as you have, if you've made it this far. If you want to support the show, like I said, like, subscribe, follow. Most of the updates that are going to be happening, I have a Telegram chat, so join it. There's a link in the description there. So if you go to just bio.link/whitepill, once again, there's a Telegram chat. All my socials are there. All my channels are there where I upload everything. If you, like I said, don't feel obligated, but if you would like to donate to this stream, you're more than welcome to. There's a PayPal set up, which, okay. Any donations that are made there, they will be read aloud at the end of stream. So if you want to make your voice heard, if you want to state your opinion, you're more than welcome to do it there. And once again, thank you to everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys have yourselves a great night. And yeah, there's more to come on this. Canada first, all the way. No excuses. We're going for a paradigm shift here. And I hope you'll join us on the ride. So yes, thank you. And have a good night.